This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I never believed in the supernatural. I'm just a regular guy trying to take care of my family in our old 4-bedroom house in Oak Ridge. It's nothing special. Just a typical suburban home with cream-colored walls, hardwood floors that creak a bit too much, and an attic that's accessed through a pull-down stairwell in the hallway. We keep it open most of the time because it helps with air circulation, even though Mom says it makes the house feel drafty. It's been 2 years since I first heard it. The voice, my name being called up through that open attic stairwell. Marcus? Not shouted, not whispered, just called normally, like someone trying to get my attention from another room. The first time I thought it was Mom. She has dementia, and sometimes she needs help with the simplest things. Getting water, finding her glasses, remembering what day it is. So when I heard my name, I immediately went downstairs to check on her. "Did you call me, Mom?" I asked. She looked at me, confused. "No, dear. I was just watching my show." I brushed it off. Old houses make strange noises. Maybe it was the TV, or maybe I was just tired. I work long hours at the construction company, and with a teenage daughter, a brother who crashes with us between jobs, and Mom needing constant care, I don't get much sleep. But then it happened again, and again, always the same, my name, called with a sense of urgency, like someone needs my immediate attention. It's never whispery or ghostly, it's clear and cuts through whatever noise is happening around me. If I'm watching TV, it's louder than the TV. If I'm running the shower, I can hear it over the water. It's always just loud enough to make me stop whatever I'm doing. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. Stress can do weird things to people, and God knows I've been under plenty of stress since Mom's diagnosis, but I'm not the type to imagine things. My brother Jake says I'm aggressively practical, the guy who checks the circuit breaker before assuming the power company screwed up. The thing is, whenever I hear the voice, I always respond. I always ask, "What do you need?" or "Is everything okay?" But there's never an answer, just silence. And I always go downstairs to check on Mom, and she always insists she didn't call me. After about 6 months of this happening randomly, I noticed a pattern. Every time I heard the voice, within 24 hours, I'd get news that someone I knew had died. The first time was my Uncle Pete. The voice called me around 9 in the morning, and by lunchtime my cousin called to tell me Uncle Pete had a heart attack in his sleep the night before. I didn't connect the dots right away. Why would I? But then my old high school buddy Mike died in a car accident. The voice had called me that morning while I was shaving. Then it was Mom's sister, Aunt Jody. The voice called me while I was making dinner, and 2 hours later we got the call that she'd had a stroke. By the 7th or 8th time, it was impossible to ignore the connection. The voice calls, someone dies, not always someone close, sometimes just acquaintances or distant relatives, but always someone connected to our family in some way. Last Wednesday, May 2nd, it was worse than ever before. I was in my bedroom folding laundry around 9 in the morning when I heard it. "Marcus?" I stopped, a pair of my daughter's jeans still in my hands. "Yes?" I called back. Nothing. I went downstairs, checked on Mom. She was in her recliner, watching a game show and working on a word search puzzle. "Did you call me, Mom?" "No, honey. Is everything all right? You look pale." I told her I was fine and went back upstairs. 5 minutes later, it happened again. "Marcus?" This time I froze. The voice sounded exactly like my brother Jake, but he was at work. I knew he was at work because I'd dropped him off myself at 7:30. I took a deep breath and responded anyway. "What do you need?" "Nothing. Just the distant sound of the TV downstairs and my daughter's music coming from her room." It continued like this for an entire hour. Every 5 or 10 minutes my name, called with increasing urgency. By 10 o'clock I was a wreck. I'd checked on Mom 6 times. I'd texted Jake twice to make sure he was okay. I'd even called my daughter Lily's school to make sure she was in class. Everyone was fine. But the voice wouldn't stop. Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. The last one was so loud I actually jumped. It sounded like someone was standing right behind me, shouting directly into my ear. I spun around, heart pounding. But of course no one was there, just the open door to my bedroom, facing the hallway with the attic stairwell. At 10:45, my phone rang. It was my sister Carly, calling from Phoenix. She was hysterical, barely able to form sentences. "It's Brandon," she finally managed to say. Brandon was her brother from her dad's second marriage. We weren't close, but we'd spent holidays together when we were kids. They found him in a bathroom at Sunset Beach. He's gone. My blood ran cold. What happened? They're saying suicide, but I don't believe it. Brandon would never. She broke down sobbing. The police are investigating. They think someone might have hurt him. I sat down on my bed, the phone still pressed to my ear as Carly cried. The voice had stopped. Complete silence filled the house except for the distant murmur of the TV downstairs. Brandon had been found dead at 10:45. The voice had been calling me from 9 to 10, more persistent than ever before. This wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. After I hung up with Carly, I sat in my room for a long time, trying to make sense of it all. What was happening? Why was I hearing this voice? And more importantly, why was it always connected to death? I haven't told anyone about this. Not Jake, not Lily, and definitely not Mom. What would I even say? Hey, I hear voices that predict when people are going to die. They'd have me committed. The worst part is not knowing when it's going to happen again. I've started dreading hearing my name. Every time Mom actually needs something and calls for me, my heart stops for a second. Is it really her, or is it the voice warning me that someone else is about to die? It always happens when there's some background noise. The TV, the shower, the dishwasher. Just enough noise that I might think I misheard something. And there's always that moment of silence after I respond, followed by what sounds like a door closing somewhere in the house. That's what makes me think I've missed Mom actually calling for help, so I always go check. Yesterday, while I was in the garage working on my truck, I heard it again. Marcus? My hands were covered in grease, and I'd been fighting with a stubborn bolt for 20 minutes. The radio was playing an old Eagles song. I froze, wrench in hand. "Hello?" I called out. "What do you need?" Nothing. Just the radio and the distant sound of traffic from the main road. I waited, heart pounding. Then I heard it. The soft sound of a door closing inside the house. I cleaned my hands as quickly as I could and went inside. Mom was napping in her recliner. Jake was still at work. Lily was at soccer practice. No one had called me. I've been on edge all day, checking my phone constantly, waiting for the inevitable bad news. Who is it this time? Whose death is the voice warning me about? I don't understand why this is happening to me. I'm not special. I don't have psychic abilities. I'm just a guy trying to keep his family together in a house that may or may not be haunted. Sometimes I wonder if I should move out, take Mom and Lily somewhere else. But would the voice follow me? Is it attached to me or to this house? And what if it's trying to help somehow? What if it's giving me a chance to, I don't know, prepare myself, say goodbye? But no, that can't be right. The warnings come too late. By the time I hear the voice, the person is already dead or about to die. There's nothing I can do to stop it. I'm writing this down because I need to tell someone, even if it's just strangers on the internet. I need to know I'm not crazy, that there's some explanation for what's happening. The worst part is the waiting, knowing that someone connected to me has died or is about to die, but not knowing who. Checking my phone, jumping every time it rings, watching my family, wondering if they're safe. It's almost 4 o'clock now. Mom is watching her afternoon shows. Jake should be home from work soon. Lily is upstairs doing homework. Everything seems normal, but I can't shake the feeling that something terrible is about to happen, that the voice is going to call me again, and this time it will be someone even closer to me. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to stop this. All I know is that every time I hear my name called from that attic stairwell, someone dies, and I'm terrified of who it might be next. Story 2. I still don't like talking about what happened that night. It's been 15 years, and I still wake up sometimes with that same feeling of dread washing over me. I guess I should start at the beginning. I was 13 when my family moved to this old mustard yellow 2-story house on the outskirts of Nyssa, Oregon. My dad had gotten a new job at the sugar factory, and my mom was excited about the extra space compared to our cramped apartment in Boise. My little sister Maria was 7, and my cousin Emilio, who has cerebral palsy, was living with us at the time while his parents were sorting out some issues. From the moment we pulled into the driveway, something felt off about that house. Not in an obvious way. It wasn't like there were dead animals on the porch or weird symbols carved into the doors. It looked normal. Boring even, but something about it made my stomach tighten up as soon as I stepped out of our minivan. Dad was all smiles as he unlocked the front door for the first time. "Welcome to our new home, Martinez family," he announced, doing that cheesy game show host voice that usually made me laugh. Not that day though. The house had both a basement and a cellar, which I thought was weird. Aren't they the same thing? But no. The basement was partially finished with concrete floors and some shelving, while the cellar was this whole other area underneath that was basically a dirt floor with stone walls. When Dad took us down there during the house tour, I couldn't even make it past the bottom step. There was this section in the back of the cellar sealed off by this rusty iron gate that looked ancient. Dad thought it was probably for wine storage or something, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was behind that gate should stay there. The air felt heavier down there, like it was pushing against my chest. I made up some excuse about helping Mom unpack and got out of there as fast as I could. That first night, none of our beds were set up yet. The moving truck had been delayed, and we only had our suitcases and a few essentials we'd brought in the minivan. Mom decided we'd all camp out in the living room. They laid out some blankets on the floor for my parents and Maria. Emilio got the bigger couch because of his CP. He needed the most comfortable spot. I took the smaller love seat nearby because I sometimes needed to help him reposition during the night. It was around 10 when everyone finally settled down. Dad was snoring within minutes, and Mom wasn't far behind. Maria was curled up with her stuffed rabbit, and Emilio was already asleep on the couch. I was tired from the move, but couldn't relax. The house kept making these weird noises, not like normal house settling sounds, but deliberate ones. Around midnight, I heard what sounded like silverware clinking in the kitchen, like someone was carefully sorting through forks and spoons. The weird thing was, we hadn't unpacked any of that stuff yet. Our kitchen boxes were still stacked in the dining room. "Dad," I whispered, "do you hear that?" He half woke up, listened for a second, and mumbled, "It's just the house, Carlos. Go to sleep." I tried, but the sounds kept coming. Now it was like drawers opening and closing. I pulled my blanket up higher and told myself it was nothing. Old houses make noise, right? But then the sounds stopped suddenly, and that silence was somehow worse. I laid there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The digital clock on Dad's phone said it was almost 1 in the morning when I heard footsteps, not from upstairs or outside, but coming up from the cellar, through the basement, and then into the kitchen. Slow, deliberate steps, not loud, but not trying to be quiet either, just steady. I froze, not even breathing. The footsteps stopped in the kitchen, and then I heard what sounded like someone dragging their fingers across the countertop. I wanted to wake my dad so badly, but something kept me from moving. Fear, probably. And then I saw him, a man standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, except he wasn't exactly a man. In the dim light coming through the windows, I could see that he was tall and thin, too thin, like his skin was stretched over his bones. His face was mostly shadow, but I could make out his eyes. They reflected the faint light like an animal's would. He stood there, completely still, looking at each member of my family. First my dad, then my mom, then Maria. When his eyes landed on Emilio, something changed in his posture. He seemed more interested, leaning forward slightly. And I knew, somehow I just knew, that whatever this thing was, it was drawn to my cousin because he was vulnerable. Without thinking, I coughed, not loud enough to wake anyone, but enough to make the entity turn its attention to me instead. And when it did, when those reflecting eyes locked onto mine, I felt a chill run through my entire body. But I didn't look away. The thing smiled then. I could see its teeth gleaming in the darkness. And the weirdest part? I found myself smiling back. Not because I was happy or amused, but because something deep inside me responded to its challenge. In that moment, something shifted inside me. It's hard to explain, but it was like my fear got pushed aside by something stronger. I felt a clarity I'd never experienced before. I knew what I had to do. Without moving, without saying a word, I drew a line in my mind, a boundary between this thing and my family, and I thought, as clearly and forcefully as I could, "This is our house now, not yours. They are off limits." The entity tilted its head, like it was surprised. It took a step forward and then stopped, as if it had hit an invisible wall right where I'd imagined my line. Its smile faded. I don't know where I got the courage, but I kept pushing with my mind. Back, go back. This is not your place anymore. The thing took a step backward, still watching me. Another step. It was at the kitchen doorway now. I kept focusing, imagining myself pushing it further away, back toward the basement door. Its movements weren't smooth anymore. It looked like it was struggling against something. When it reached the basement door, I had one final thought. You don't belong here. Go. The basement door slammed shut with a bang that shook the walls. Everyone in the room jolted awake. Maria started crying and Mom scrambled to turn on the lights. What was that? Dad was on his feet immediately, looking around. The basement door, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. It just slammed shut. Dad checked the door, then went down to look around the basement with a flashlight. Of course, he found nothing. Must have been the wind, he said when he came back up. There's a small window down there that was open a crack. I closed it. Everyone settled back down, though it took a while for Maria to stop sniffling. Mom gave me a concerned look. I must have looked as shaken as I felt, but eventually they all drifted back to sleep. Not me. I stayed awake all night, watching that basement door. I didn't hear any more footsteps or see the entity again, but I felt its presence. It was still in the house, somewhere deep below us, and it was angry. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I realized something important. I would fight. Whatever that thing was, whatever lived in this house before us, I would stand against it if it threatened my family. That night marked the beginning of something for me, a kind of understanding about myself and about the world that I hadn't had before. We lived in that house for 3 more years. Things happened that I still can't fully explain. Objects would move on their own. Cold spots would appear in rooms for no reason. Sometimes at night, we'd hear scratching from inside the walls. My parents blamed old pipes, mice, the wind, anything rational, but the entity never again came into our living spaces while anyone was there. It stayed in the cellar behind that iron gate. Sometimes I'd stand at the top of the cellar stairs and feel it watching me, but it never tried to come up when I was looking. I think it was waiting for me to let my guard down, to forget about that invisible line I'd drawn. I never did. The weirdest part? A couple years after we moved away, I found out from a school project on local history that our house had once been owned by a man who disappeared in the 1930s. According to the old newspaper article, neighbors reported that he'd become obsessed with digging under his house, claiming he'd found something important down there. One day, he just vanished. The police searched but never found a body. They did, however, find a section in his cellar that had been walled off with an iron gate. I don't know what that thing in our house was. Maybe it was the spirit of the man who disappeared, or maybe it was whatever he found down there that he thought was so important. All I know is that night changed me. I'm 28 now, and I've had other encounters since then. It's like once you see through the veil between worlds, you can't unsee it. But I've never forgotten that first night when I learned that sometimes the only thing standing between your loved ones and the darkness is you. Whatever that entity was, it's probably still there in that mustard yellow house, waiting behind its iron gate. And sometimes, when I'm lying awake at night, I swear I can still feel it watching me from across the miles, remembering the 13-year-old boy who somehow pushed it back into the shadows. Story 3. I've never told anyone about my gift before. Not my friends, not my family. Definitely not my co-workers. How do you casually mention you can see dead people without sounding completely insane? So I've kept it to myself for 32 years. But after what happened last Tuesday, I need to get this off my chest, even if it's just typing it out to strangers on the internet. I've always found cemeteries peaceful. While most people avoid them or get creeped out, I'm drawn to them. There's something calming about walking among the headstones, reading the names, and calculating how long each person lived. I've been taking evening walks through Oak Ridge Cemetery for about 4 years now. It's on my way home from the accounting firm where I work, and it helps clear my head after staring at spreadsheets all day. The cemetery spirits usually keep to themselves. Some wander aimlessly, others sit by their graves, and a few follow visitors who've come to pay respects. They're not scary. Most are just confused or lonely. I acknowledge them with small nods or slight waves, and most return the gesture. Some look surprised when I do this, like they're not used to being seen. Last Tuesday was unusually beautiful. We'd had a brief summer shower in the afternoon that cleared away the humidity, and by 6 o'clock everything felt fresh. The setting sun cast this golden light across the wet grass that made the whole cemetery glow. The spirits seemed livelier than usual. An old man in a Civil War uniform was strolling with better posture. A woman in a 70s pantsuit was humming loudly, and several others were just standing with their faces tilted up as if feeling the sun. I followed my usual path, winding through the older section with its weathered stones, past the small pond where ducks sometimes nest, and toward the center where a massive angel statue stands. That's when I noticed them, the children. There were 7 of them playing near the angel. They looked to be between 5 and 10 years old, all dressed in what I assumed were their funeral clothes. Little suits and dresses that seemed from another time. I'd seen child spirits before, and they always hit me hard. There's something profoundly unfair about seeing a kid who never got to grow up. These children were playing some kind of tag game, running through and around gravestones, their laughter silent but their joy obvious in their movements. Despite everything, they still found ways to play, and that always gave me a strange comfort. I was about to continue on my path when I noticed another child standing far back among a cluster of newer graves. He wasn't playing with the others, he just stood there watching them, hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped forward. He looked about 8 or 9, wearing shorts and a button-up shirt that might have been white once, but now appeared gray and smudged with what looked like soot. Something about his isolation tugged at me. I changed direction and walked toward him, careful not to startle him. As I got closer, I could see dark marks on his face and arms, burn scars that must have followed him into death. "Hi there," I said quietly when I was a few feet away. He looked up at me, surprised, then glanced behind himself, as if checking if I was talking to someone else. "Yes, I'm talking to you," I said with a small smile. "I'm Thomas." "Mitchell," he replied after a pause. His voice sounded distant, like it was coming through water. "Mitchell Higgins." "Nice to meet you, Mitchell. Why aren't you playing with the others?" He kicked at the ground, a gesture so human and childlike it made my chest ache. "They don't want me to play with them." I looked over at the other children. They were still running around, oblivious to our conversation. "That doesn't seem fair. Should I go talk to them?" Mitchell's eyes widened in alarm. "No, they never play with me. It's okay." I nodded, respecting his wishes. "Mind if I sit with you for a bit then?" He shrugged, which I took as permission. I sat down on the grass, damp from the earlier rain, and Mitchell sat beside me. We watched the other children play in silence for a while. I noticed now that many of the other children had burn marks too. A little girl in a blue dress had severe burns along one arm. A boy in short pants had a face that was red and raw on one side. Despite these injuries, they played without any sign of pain or discomfort. "Were you all friends?" I asked carefully. Mitchell shook his head. "We all went to Oak Ridge Elementary, but not all in the same grade." I nodded, letting him continue if he wanted to. "We died together," he said flatly. The way he said it, so matter-of-fact, sent a chill through me despite the warm evening. "I'm sorry to hear that." "It was 1976, he continued. October 21st. Something clicked in my mind. I remembered reading about a school fire in this town decades ago. It had been one of those tragic local histories everyone knew about. I'd even seen a small memorial for it in the town museum when I first moved here. "The Oak Ridge Elementary fire," I said softly. Mitchell nodded, still looking at the playing children. "That's why they don't like me." I was confused. Why wouldn't they like you? You all experienced the same tragedy. He turned to look at me then, his eyes unnaturally old in his young face. "Because I started it." The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't have been more shocked if he'd pushed me over. "You... what?" "I started the fire," he repeated with that same eerie calmness. "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted school to be canceled." My mouth felt dry. I was sitting next to the child who had caused a tragedy that had been mourned by this town for decades. "I found my dad's lighter in his jacket," Mitchell continued, his voice emotionless. "I snuck into the supply closet during lunch and lit some papers on fire. I thought the fire alarm would go off and we'd all go outside, but it spread too fast. The closet was full of paint and cleaning stuff." I couldn't speak. The horror of what he was telling me, so calmly, so matter-of-factly, left me speechless. I tried to tell a teacher, but no one could hear me because everyone was screaming, the hallway filled with smoke really fast. He looked down at his burned arms. I couldn't get out, none of us could. I looked over at the other children. They were still playing, but now their game seemed more frantic, their movements more desperate. I wondered if they were unconsciously recreating their last moments, running from the flames. 23 kids died, Mitchell said. "These are just the ones buried here. The others are in different cemeteries." "And they know?" I asked, finding my voice at last. "The other children know you started the fire?" He nodded. "That's why they hate me. They found out after we all got here. I didn't tell them at first, but there aren't many secrets among the dead." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to get up and walk away. This child, this spirit, had caused immeasurable pain. But looking at him, I saw an 8-year-old boy who made a terrible mistake and had spent nearly 50 years isolated in death because of it. "Were you ever sorry?" I asked, immediately regretting how harsh it sounded. Mitchell didn't seem offended. "Every second," he whispered. "I watch them play every day. I see their burns. I remember their screams. I know all their names and how old they were." He recited them without prompting. Samantha Jenkins was 7, Bobby Taylor was 6, Elsie Monroe was 9. He went through all 7 children playing by the angel, their ages, and even which classrooms they were in. "I tried to apologize," he continued, "right after we all got here, but they chased me away. That girl in the blue dress, that's Elsie. She was the nicest girl in school. Everyone liked her. She threw rocks at me and told me to stay away forever." I glanced over at Elsie, the girl with the burned arm, who was now playing hopscotch on imaginary squares. It was hard to picture her throwing rocks. "So you just watch them every day?" "Every day," he confirmed. "Sometimes I try to play alone on the other side of the cemetery, but it's not the same." We sat in silence for a while. The sun was getting lower, casting longer shadows across the gravestones. I knew I should be heading home soon, but something kept me rooted to that spot beside Mitchell. "Did anyone know?" I asked eventually. "That you started the fire, I mean, when you were alive?" He shook his head. I died before I could tell anyone. They said it was faulty wiring in the news. My parents cried a lot. They thought I was a hero because my teacher said I was trying to help other kids get out. His voice cracked slightly. But I wasn't. I was just scared. I tried to imagine the burden of carrying that secret, even in death. No wonder he looked so much older than his physical age. "You're the first person I've told who's still alive," he said, looking at me with those ancient eyes. "The only adults who come here are visitors for other graves. You're the only one who's ever seen me." I felt the weight of that statement. What was I supposed to do with this information? The fire was decades ago. Everyone involved was likely dead or elderly now. Would revealing the truth help anyone, or would it just cause more pain? As I was lost in these thoughts, I noticed the other children had stopped playing. They were standing in a loose circle, all looking in our direction. Not at me, at Mitchell. "They know I'm talking to you," Mitchell said, his voice tight with anxiety. "They don't like it when anyone pays attention to me." The children began walking toward us, moving with an unnatural synchronicity that made my skin crawl. Their burned faces and limbs looked more pronounced now, their eyes reflecting nothing but cold anger. Mitchell stood up quickly. "You should go. They can't hurt you, but they'll be angry." I stood too, feeling inexplicably frightened despite knowing they were just spirits. "What will they do to you?" "The same thing they always do," he said with resignation. "They'll remind me." Before I could ask what he meant, the children were upon us. They moved silently, forming a circle around Mitchell. I stepped back, an instinctive reaction to their presence. They didn't speak, at least not in any way I could hear, but Mitchell's face contorted in pain. He put his hands over his ears and closed his eyes, shaking his head violently. "Stop it," I said, trying to intervene. "Leave him alone." None of them acknowledged me. They just continued to stare at Mitchell, who was now crouched on the ground, his entire body trembling. Suddenly, his appearance began to change. The burn marks spread across his face and arms, becoming more severe before my eyes. His clothes darkened with soot and then began to show charred edges. He opened his mouth in a silent scream, and I saw that the inside of his mouth was blackened too. I backed away, horrified. They were making him relive his death. "That's enough," I shouted, but my voice seemed to evaporate in the evening air. As quickly as it had begun, it ended. The children turned away from Mitchell and walked back toward the angel statue, resuming their play as if nothing had happened. Mitchell remained on the ground, his appearance slowly returning to how it had been before. I approached him cautiously. "Mitchell, are you okay?" He didn't look up. They do that sometimes, to remind me what I did, what it felt like. His voice was barely audible. "They make me feel the fire again." I felt sick. This was beyond punishment. It was torture, and it had been going on for almost 50 years. "Mitchell, I started, not knowing what to say. "You should go," he interrupted, finally looking up. "It's getting dark. The living shouldn't be here after dark." I wanted to argue, to offer some kind of comfort, but what could I possibly say? How could I help a child who had been trapped in this purgatory of his own making for decades? "I'll come back," I promised. "Tomorrow." He gave me a sad smile. "Okay, but they won't let you talk to me again. They never do." I walked home in a daze that night, my mind reeling from everything I'd learned. I couldn't stop thinking about Mitchell, about the other children, about the eternal punishment cycle playing out in that peaceful cemetery day after day. I did go back the next day and the day after that. But Mitchell was right. I never saw him again. I caught glimpses of the other children sometimes, still playing by the angel statue, but Mitchell remained hidden from me. I've researched the Oak Ridge Elementary fire extensively since then. 23 children and 2 teachers died. The official cause was listed as electrical failure. Mitchell Higgins was indeed among the dead, described in a newspaper article as a quiet boy who, according to surviving classmates, was trying to help others escape. I don't know what to do with this knowledge. I don't know if Mitchell wanted me to clear his name or if he just needed someone to finally hear his confession. All I know is that somewhere in Oak Ridge Cemetery, a little boy has been burning for 50 years, and I'm the only living person who knows why. Story 4. I've never been the type to believe in the paranormal. Ghost stories were just that, stories. I'm a logical person, always have been. That's why what happened to me 3 nights ago has completely shattered my worldview. I still can't wrap my head around it, and I'm hoping writing it down might help me process everything. I live alone in a 2-story house in Millfield. It's your typical suburban neighborhood. Quiet, family-oriented, nothing out of the ordinary. My girlfriend Jess lives about 4 hours away, so we've gotten into this routine of falling asleep on FaceTime together. It sounds cheesy, but it helps with the distance. We usually call in the afternoon and just keep the line open until one of our phones dies during the night. Tuesday started like any other day. I called Jess around 2:15 in the afternoon while I was working from home. We did our usual thing, talked about our days, watched some shows together, ate dinner together, and eventually got ready for bed. I sleep in the basement because it's cooler down there, and I've converted it into a pretty comfortable bedroom. I should mention that I always, and I mean always, sleep fully clothed, t-shirt and pajama pants at minimum. This isn't just a preference. I had a traumatic break-in experience years ago, and ever since I've felt vulnerable sleeping any other way. Jess knows this about me. It's non-negotiable. So anyway, we were on the call, and I remember getting sleepy around midnight. Jess was still watching something on her laptop, but I dozed off. According to her, I was completely knocked out by 1 in the morning, snoring and everything. She remembers checking the time at exactly 2:50 a.m. because her cat knocked something over, and she looked at her phone while getting up to check. She specifically remembers I was still sound asleep at that point, still snoring, still fully clothed in the t-shirt I'd worn all day. The next part is where things get unsettling. I woke up Wednesday morning feeling strange, disoriented in a way that was different from normal morning grogginess. The first thing I noticed was that I was completely naked, not just shirtless, completely naked. My clothes were scattered around the room, not folded or placed anywhere specific, just thrown about like someone had yanked them off in a hurry. My heart started racing immediately. I never sleep naked. Never. Not since the break-in. The fact that I had no memory of removing my clothes sent me into a mild panic. I quickly grabbed fresh clothes and put them on, trying to calm myself down. Maybe I got hot during the night, but I've never done this before, not once in years. Still feeling uneasy, I headed upstairs to get some coffee. That's when I noticed more things that didn't make sense. My phone was propped up on the kitchen counter in its usual spot where I leave it when I'm cooking. But I had no memory of coming upstairs during the night. Next to it was a spread of snacks, a water bottle filled with Coke, not water, an open bag of chips, some cookies, and other random food items from my pantry. I stood there staring at this mini feast, completely confused. I had no memory of preparing any of this. None whatsoever. The last thing I remembered was falling asleep downstairs on the FaceTime call with Jess. My phone was dead, of course. I plugged it in and waited anxiously for it to turn on. As soon as it had enough charge, I called Jess. "Hey, did I say anything weird last night?" I asked immediately when she picked up. "What do you mean?" She sounded concerned. Like, did I tell you I was going upstairs or anything? Did I end the call deliberately? She explained that she had fallen asleep around 3, and when she woke up briefly around 5 a.m., she noticed our call had already disconnected. She assumed my phone had just died, which was normal for our overnight calls. We did some quick math. If we started the call at 2:15 p.m. and her phone showed the call lasted 15 hours and 15 minutes, that meant my phone would have died around 3:30 a.m. So here's the timeline we pieced together. At 2:50 a.m., I was definitely asleep in my basement bedroom, fully clothed and snoring on the FaceTime call. By 3:30 a.m., my phone was upstairs in the kitchen, plugged in its usual spot, surrounded by snacks I don't remember getting, and I was back downstairs naked in my bed. That means in less than 40 minutes I supposedly woke up, took my phone upstairs, navigated a pretty steep flight of stairs in the dark, prepared food, brought it to the kitchen counter, and then went back downstairs, removed all my clothes, and got back in bed, all without any memory of doing so. The thing is, I've never sleepwalked before, not once in my life. I don't have any history of mental health issues that would cause me to black out or lose time. I don't take any medications that could cause memory loss. I hadn't been drinking that night. There was absolutely no explanation for why I would have no memory of those 40 minutes. What's even more disturbing is that going up those basement stairs requires full consciousness. They're steep, old, and one of them has a loose board that you have to be careful with. The idea that I navigated those stairs while sleepwalking or in some altered state is terrifying. I could have seriously injured myself. I spent most of Wednesday feeling on edge, trying to find some rational explanation. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Maybe I did sleepwalk for the first time at 32 years old, but nothing felt right about those explanations. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the witching hour, that time between 3 and 4 a.m. that paranormal enthusiasts always talk about. I've never given it much thought before, but now I couldn't stop thinking about how my unexplained behavior fell exactly during that time frame. I remembered reading somewhere that spirits or entities need energy to manifest, and they often drain electronic devices. My phone dying right around the time of my blackout suddenly seemed less like a coincidence and more like something else, something I don't want to name because it sounds crazy even as I type this. The most disturbing thought kept circling in my mind. What if something had temporarily taken control of my body? What if something had possessed me for those 40 minutes? The thought makes my skin crawl. I've been sleeping with the lights on since then. I've also started setting up my old laptop to record my bedroom at night. I need to know if this happens again. I need evidence of what I'm doing during these blackouts, if they happen again. Last night I found myself obsessively checking the time as 3 a.m. approached. I couldn't help but wonder, if something had taken control of me once, what was stopping it from happening again? The most terrifying part is that whatever happened during those lost 40 minutes violated my deepest sense of security. Taking off my clothes, the one thing I've been unable to do while sleeping for years due to trauma, feels like whatever it was knew exactly how to make me feel vulnerable. It knew my fears somehow. I've been in this house for 3 years without any strange occurrences. Nothing has changed recently. No new furniture, no renovations, no disturbances of any kind that might have awakened something. The only unusual thing that happened recently was finding a small, old-looking key in my backyard while gardening last weekend. I didn't think much of it at the time. Probably belonged to previous owners, so I just put it in my junk drawer. Now I'm wondering if touching it somehow connected me to something. That sounds ridiculous as I type it, but I'm grasping at straws here. Since that night, I've been experiencing other small oddities. Nothing as dramatic as the lost time, but unsettling nonetheless. The temperature in my basement bedroom drops dramatically around 3 a.m. each night. I've checked the thermostat. It's not changing. My dog refuses to come downstairs now, which is new behavior. And twice I've woken up to find my bedroom door open, despite specifically remembering closing it before bed. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. A doctor would probably think I'm having some kind of breakdown. My friends would just tell me I was sleepwalking. Jess is worried, but she's 4 hours away and can't exactly help from there. What keeps haunting me is the precision of it all, the specific time frame, the way my phone was carefully placed in its usual spot, not just thrown somewhere random. The fact that I apparently prepared food but didn't eat it. It was all still there in the morning. And most disturbing, the removal of my clothes, the one thing that makes me feel most vulnerable. It feels deliberate. It feels like whatever happened during those 40 minutes wasn't random. It feels like a message. I'm writing this at 2:30 a.m. I've been fighting sleep for hours, terrified of what might happen if I close my eyes. My laptop is recording. My doors are locked. I've even put a chair under my doorknob. But I can't shake the feeling that whatever happened that night isn't finished with me, that it's just getting started. The clock just changed to 2:40. 10 minutes until the time I was last confirmed to be myself. My phone battery is at 15%. I'm going to post this now, just in case. If something happens again tonight, at least there will be a record of what's been going on. Wait, I just heard footsteps upstairs. I live alone. Story 5. I still dream about that goddamn whistle. It's been nearly 20 years, but I hear it sometimes when I'm drifting off to sleep, and I wake up in a cold sweat every single time. I've never talked about this outside of a few drunken conversations with Jake and Matt, but I need to get this off my chest once and for all. This happened back in 2005 in Cairns, Queensland. I was 14 then, a skinny kid with too much curiosity and not enough sense. My mates Jake and Matt were the same. We were that group of neighborhood kids always looking for the next stupid adventure. We'd explore storm drains, climb the water tower, all that typical teenage boy stuff. But nothing we did before or since compares to what happened at the Barrett house. Everyone in our neighborhood knew about the Barrett place. It sat on the corner of Mulgrave Road and Wellington Street. This weathered Queenslander on stilts with peeling yellow paint and a rusty tin roof. The garden had gone wild years ago, lantana and guinea grass growing higher than the veranda. The property backed onto a small patch of bushland that separated our suburb from the next. The Barretts vanished in '98, just fucking disappeared overnight. Mum, Dad, and their 2 kids. Mrs. Thornton next door noticed the stillness of the place after a couple days and called the police. When they finally went in, they found dinner plates on the table, coffee mugs half full, like they'd just gotten up in the middle of their evening and walked out. No signs of struggle, no blood, no nothing. Their cars were still in the garage, their wallets and keys still in the house. The only thing the police found was this message scratched into the wooden floorboards of the kids' bedroom. "We heard the whistle. It's coming." That was it. No other clues. The case went cold after a few months. People talked about it for years, though. Some said they ran off to escape debt. Others thought maybe it was a cult thing. My mum always said the father seemed off when she'd see him at the shops, but nobody really knew what happened. By 2005, the Barrett house had been empty for 7 years. The bank owned it, but nobody wanted to buy it. It just sat there, slowly rotting, and like moths to a flame, it drew us in. It was a Saturday in July, middle of winter but still hot as balls during the day. We'd been kicking around the neighborhood on our bikes, bored out of our minds. We ended up at the park behind the Barrett place, and Matt, always the instigator, suggested we take a look inside. "No way," I said, but I wasn't exactly putting up a fight. We'd talked about breaking in for years. "Come on, Lucas," Jake said. "Don't be a pussy. Nobody's been in there for ages." So we stashed our bikes in the bushes and hopped the back fence. The grass in the yard was waist high, and I remember how it scratched against my bare legs as we pushed through it. The house loomed above us on those old wooden stilts that are typical of Queenslanders. The afternoon sun was starting to get low, casting long shadows across the yard. We found a window at the back with a busted lock. Matt jimmied it open with his pocket knife, and we climbed through into what must have been the laundry room. The air inside hit me like a wet blanket, thick and stale, with this weird smell I couldn't place, kind of like rain, which made no sense because we hadn't had rain for weeks. "Fuck me, it stinks in here," Jake whispered, pulling his t-shirt up over his nose. We moved through the house slowly, our footsteps echoing on the wooden floors. Everything was covered in a layer of dust, but otherwise, it looked like someone could walk back in any moment. There were still family photos on the walls, clothes in the closets, toys scattered around the kids' rooms. It was eerie as hell, like we'd stepped into a time capsule. In the living room, there was a TV guide open on the coffee table, dated June 3rd, 1998. A mug with something dark and fuzzy growing in it sat next to it. I remember feeling like we were being watched and kept glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. "Check this out," Jake called from the kitchen. He was pointing at the dining table. 4 plates were set out, with forks and knives beside them. Whatever food had been there was long gone. Just dark stains remained on the porcelain. 4 chairs were pulled out, like everyone had gotten up at once. Let's find the kids' room, Matt said. I want to see that message. We found it easily enough. A small bedroom with bunk beds and dinosaur posters on the walls. Action figures were lined up on a shelf collecting dust. And there on the floor, right in the middle of the room, were the words scratched deep into the floorboards. We heard the whistle, it's coming. The letters were jagged and desperate, like they'd been carved in a hurry with something sharp, maybe a kitchen knife or scissors. I crouched down and ran my fingers over the grooves. They were deep. Who do you reckon wrote it? Jake asked, his voice quiet. The mum or dad? Had to be one of the kids, Matt said. Look how low it is to the ground. A chill ran up my spine at that thought. What the fuck had these kids seen or heard that made them carve a warning into the floor? We were quiet for a moment, just staring at those words. Then we heard Matt calling from somewhere outside. Guys, holy shit, you need to see this. We found our way back through the house and out the back door onto the veranda. Matt was standing in the middle of the overgrown backyard, looking toward the back fence where we'd come in. His face was pale. What? I called out, starting down the steps. The tracks, he said, pointing. Where the fuck did they come from? At first, I couldn't see what he was talking about. Then, as I got closer, I saw it. Cutting through the tall grass was a set of train tracks. Actual fucking train tracks. The metal rails glinting in the late afternoon sun, wooden sleepers half buried in the earth. They ran from the back fence straight toward the house. I felt my stomach drop. That's not possible, I stammered. We just climbed over that fence, Jake said. There weren't any tracks there, but there they were, as real as anything. The tracks ran from the back fence, through the yard, and ended abruptly about 5 meters from the back of the house, like whatever had been building them had just stopped mid-job. This doesn't make any fucking sense, I said. We've ridden past this place 100 times. There's never been train tracks here. Matt walked over to the tracks and crouched down, touching one of the rails. They're real, he said. And they're old. Look at the rust. I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest. He was right. The rails were weathered and rusty, the wooden sleepers rotting in places. These weren't new, but they couldn't have been there before. We would have noticed. Maybe they've always been here and we just didn't see them because of the tall grass, Jake suggested, but even he didn't sound convinced. Matt was walking along the tracks now, heading toward the back fence. They go into the bush, he called back, through that gap in the fence. I was about to follow him when I heard it, a sound so faint at first that I thought I was imagining it, a whistle, like an old steam train far in the distance. Do you hear that? I asked, my voice cracking. Jake nodded, his eyes wide. It sounds like a train whistle, Matt finished, freezing in his tracks. We stood there, listening as the sound grew gradually louder. It was coming from somewhere beyond the back fence, deep in the bushland. A long, mournful whistle, followed by what sounded like the chug of an engine, but there were no train lines anywhere near our suburb. The closest was the sugarcane train tracks kilometers away, and those didn't run anymore. The whistle came again, louder this time, closer. We need to go, I said, backing away from the tracks. Right fucking now. Matt was still standing by the tracks, staring into the bush like he was hypnotized. Do you see that? He whispered. There's a light. I looked where he was pointing and felt my blood turn to ice. Through the gap in the fence, deep in the bushland, there was a pinprick of light, and it was getting bigger. Matt, I screamed, get away from the tracks. The whistle blew again, so loud now it seemed to vibrate in my chest. The chugging sound was unmistakable, the rhythmic thunder of a train approaching. Matt finally snapped out of it and sprinted toward us. We all ran for the side fence, scrambling over it in a panic. I fell hard on the other side, scraping my palms on the concrete, but I was up in an instant. We grabbed our bikes and pedaled away as fast as we could, not looking back. We didn't stop until we reached the McDonald's 3 blocks away, where we collapsed at an outside table, gasping for breath. What the actual fuck was that? Jake panted, his face sheet white. Train tracks, Matt said. There were fucking train tracks that weren't there before. And that whistle, I added. You both heard it, right? They nodded. We sat in silence for a while, trying to process what had happened. Eventually, we made a pact to go back the next day, in broad daylight, to check if the tracks were still there. But when we returned the following morning, there was nothing. No tracks. No evidence that anything had been there at all. Just the overgrown yard we'd initially climbed into. We never went back to the Barrett house after that. A few months later, it was finally demolished, and a block of units was built on the site. I've driven past it a few times over the years, but I never stop. Years later, when I was in uni, I got curious and did some research on the property's history. Before the Barrett house was built in the 70s, the land was part of a sugarcane farm owned by a bloke named William Kiernan. He lived there alone for decades, until he disappeared in '87. The newspaper article I found said his neighbor reported that Kiernan often told people, "It ain't mine to leave, the train still runs, you just have to listen." I've never told this story publicly before. Most people would think I'm making it up or that we were just stupid kids scaring ourselves. But I know what I saw, I know what I heard, and sometimes, even now, when I'm lying in bed at night, I hear that whistle in the distance, faint at first, then gradually louder, like it's coming closer. On those nights, I don't sleep. I just lie there, waiting for it to pass, wondering what happened to the Barrett family, and if one day, whatever took them might come for me too. Story 6. I never wanted to share this experience with anyone, but it's been eating away at me for months. I guess I'm hoping that writing it all down might help me process what happened, or maybe someone out there has experienced something similar and can tell me I'm not losing my mind. I've always seen things differently than other people. Since I was a little kid, I'd noticed these small colored orbs and auras in my vision. I remember asking my mom about them when I was maybe 5 or 6, and the confused look she gave me made it clear this wasn't normal. She thought I was making up stories, which I guess is why I started calling them my imaginary friends. Growing up in Pinecrest wasn't easy for me. My home life was complicated. My dad had a drinking problem and my mom was barely present, emotionally speaking. Those colorful orbs became a strange source of comfort during the worst times. When Dad would start yelling or throwing things, I'd focus on the little blue one that always seemed to hover near my right shoulder. Sounds crazy, I know, but it helped. When I was 17, I was in a car accident that left me with a spinal cord injury and some minor brain trauma. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive, let alone walking. During my recovery, I remember wondering if the head injury would make the visual phenomena go away, but they stayed exactly the same. I even asked one of my neurologists about it, and he gave me a bunch of tests, but nothing conclusive ever came from it. Eventually, I just accepted it as my normal. Fast forward to this past February. I'd been living in my own place in Pinecrest for about 3 years, not far from my childhood home, but far enough. It was a small 2-bedroom ranch-style house, nothing special, but it was mine. The orbs had been a constant companion throughout my life, floating in and out of my peripheral vision, but I rarely paid them much attention anymore. But something changed. I first noticed it one Tuesday evening after work. The orbs seemed bigger, more vibrant somehow. I remember standing in my kitchen heating up some leftover pasta when I felt this weird sensation, like the air had gotten thicker. When I turned around to grab a drink from the fridge, that's when I saw it for the first time. There was something standing in front of my refrigerator. Not a person, not exactly. It was about my height, roughly person-shaped, but completely translucent. The best way I can describe it is like looking through clear contact paper or maybe slightly foggy cellophane. There were no features, no face, no clothing, just this vague humanoid outline that distorted the view of whatever was behind it. My first thought was that it was a trick of the light, maybe something wrong with my eyes. I blinked hard, then moved to the left to see if the visual distortion would change perspective. It didn't. It stayed right where it was, as if it were actually standing there. I rubbed my eyes, took off my glasses and cleaned them, put them back on. Nothing changed. "Hello?" I said, feeling immediately stupid for talking to what was probably just eye strain or something. No response, no movement. I closed my eyes for a full 10 seconds, took a deep breath, and when I opened them again, the figure was still there. At this point, my heart was racing, but I still wasn't exactly scared, more confused and unsettled. After about 30 seconds of us just staring at each other, though it had no eyes that I could see, I decided to approach it. As I took a step forward, it simply vanished. Not like it walked away or faded gradually. 1 second it was there, and the next it wasn't. I convinced myself it was stress. Work had been insane that week. I hadn't been sleeping well, and I was probably just exhausted. I heated up my food, ate, and tried to forget about it. 3 days later, it happened again. I was heading out to grab the mail when I saw the same foggy figure standing by my front door. This time was different, though. I immediately felt like it was watching me, even though it had no visible eyes. My heart started pounding in my chest, and I froze in place, unsure what to do. My mind raced through possible explanations: hallucination, gas leak, brain tumor, but none of them felt right. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Again, no response, but this time I swear it tilted its head slightly, as if considering me. After what felt like forever, but was probably only 20 seconds, it disappeared just like before. Instant, gone. Over the next 2 weeks, the appearances became more frequent. I'd see it several times a day, usually in the same spot near the front door, sometimes in the kitchen again, once in the hallway outside my bedroom. During the day, it was always that same translucent, foggy appearance. But at night, this is where it gets really freaky. At night it looked darker, more solid somehow, though still translucent, and instead of standing upright, it would hover horizontally above my bed, like it was lying on an invisible surface about 3 feet above me. The first time I woke up to see it floating above me, I nearly had a heart attack. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, just lay there, paralyzed with fear, staring up at this dark, person-shaped fog hovering over me. After about a minute, I managed to reach for the lamp beside my bed. When the light came on, the figure was gone. I started sleeping with the lights on after that. The weird thing is, despite how terrifying these encounters were, I never felt like the figure meant me harm. It never tried to touch me or approach me aggressively. If anything, it felt protective, like it was keeping watch. I know that sounds absurd, but that's genuinely how it felt. Maybe my brain was just trying to rationalize the irrational to keep me from completely losing it. About 3 weeks after the first sighting, my friend Mike came over to hang out. We ordered pizza, watched a basketball game, normal stuff. I didn't mention the figure to him. How could I, without sounding completely insane? Throughout the evening, I kept glancing nervously at the front door, half expecting to see my foggy visitor, but nothing appeared. When Mike was getting ready to leave around 11, I walked him to the door. As he was putting on his jacket, I saw it. The foggy figure was standing right next to the door, exactly where Mike would have to walk to exit. My blood ran cold, but I tried to act normal, not wanting Mike to think I was having some kind of episode. As Mike headed for the door, the figure did something it had never done before. It moved toward him, not aggressively, but deliberately, positioning itself directly in Mike's path. I wanted to warn him, to tell him to stop, but what could I say? "Hey, don't walk through the invisible ghost thing that only I can see." Mike walked right through it. The moment he did, he stopped abruptly, his whole body tensing. "Whoa," he said, rubbing his arms. "I just got the chills, like hardcore. Did you feel that? It's like walking through a freezer or something." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Mike could feel it. He couldn't see it, but he could physically feel it when he passed through it. This wasn't just in my head. This was real. After Mike left, I sat on my couch for hours, trying to make sense of what was happening. If the figure was real enough to create a physical sensation when someone passed through it, what exactly was it? A ghost, some kind of energy field, a tear in reality. None of the explanations I could come up with made any logical sense. That night, it appeared above my bed again. This time, instead of panicking, I forced myself to stay calm and observe it. It hovered there, dark and fog-like, for almost 30 minutes before disappearing. I didn't sleep at all. The next day, I did something I probably should have done from the beginning. I started researching. I looked up visual hallucinations, paranormal phenomena, even local history to see if my house might be built on some kind of sacred or haunted ground. Nothing I found explained what I was experiencing. I considered seeing a doctor, but the incident with Mike had convinced me this wasn't a medical issue. Something was actually in my house, something that could affect the physical world. If I told a doctor about seeing invisible figures, they'd probably just put me on antipsychotics and dismiss the whole thing. For the next week, the figure appeared with the same frequency, several times during the day near the front door or in the kitchen, and at night above my bed. I started trying to communicate with it. I'd ask questions out loud, request that it give me some sign of what it wanted, even tried writing notes and leaving them where it usually appeared. Nothing worked. It never responded in any way I could understand. Then about a month ago, it stopped, just stopped. No gradual tapering off, no final dramatic appearance. One day, it was there like usual, and the next day, it wasn't. I waited, expecting it to return, but days passed, then weeks, with no sign of the foggy figure. But here's the thing. Even though I can't see it anymore, I still sometimes feel like I'm being watched. I'll be sitting on the couch watching TV and suddenly get goosebumps, or I'll be in the shower and feel like someone just entered the bathroom. And there's this other thing that started happening. I'll catch whiffs of perfume or cologne that I don't own and can't identify. The scent will be strong for a few seconds, then disappear completely. I don't know what the foggy figure was, or why it appeared to me, or where it went. I don't know if it was trying to warn me about something or protect me or just observe. All I know is that it was real. Mike's reaction proved that much, and that whatever it was, it hasn't completely left. Sometimes I find myself hoping it will come back just so I can try again to understand what it wants. Other times I'm grateful for its absence, relieved to not have to explain to dates or visitors why I keep staring at empty spots in my house. I'm writing this all down now because I need to tell someone, even anonymously. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? Am I just losing my mind, or is there something out there that science can't explain? Whatever the foggy figure of Pinecrest was, it changed how I see the world. I just wish I knew why it chose me. Story 7. I've never shared this with anyone outside my family before. It's been with me for 20 years now, and I still can't make sense of it. Sometimes I wonder if I should see a therapist, but I'm afraid they'll just diagnose me with some sleep disorder and dismiss everything else. Since I was 5 years old, I've had these dreams about an old woman in this house. Not just any house. Always the same one on the inside, though weirdly, the outside changes sometimes. The layout is burned into my brain. I could draw you the floor plan perfectly, especially the basement. That basement, I hate even thinking about it. The thing is, I've never actually seen her face, not once in all these years, but I know she's there. I can feel her presence like a weight pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. It's like when you know someone's watching you, but 100 times worse. My skin crawls just remembering it. When I was little, the dreams were like some twisted game of hide and seek. I'd be hiding somewhere in the house, under a bed, in a closet, behind a couch, and I could hear her shuffling around, searching for me. Her breathing was raspy, uneven. She'd call out in this sing-song voice that made my blood run cold. "I know you're here, little one. Come out, come out." And she'd always say if she found me, she'd hurt me. Not in those exact words. It was more like I just understood what would happen. Kid me knew instinctively that being found meant something terrible. I'd wake up crying most nights. My mom would come in and hold me, tell me it was just a nightmare, but it never felt like just anything. It felt real in a way my other dreams never did. When I hit high school, the dreams changed. They got worse. Instead of hide and seek, I started experiencing sleep paralysis with her. I'd wake up in my bed, unable to move, and I'd feel her in the room with me. Sometimes at the foot of my bed, sometimes right next to me, leaning over me, and she'd whisper in this gravelly voice right in my ear, "You're still asleep, Eliza. You'll always be asleep." Then she'd laugh, and the sound would echo inside my head until I actually woke up gasping for air. Now I'm 25, and the dreams have evolved again. These days, she chases me through the house. I can hear her behind me, getting closer and closer, no matter how fast I run. The floors creak under her weight, and sometimes she scrapes her nails along the walls as she follows me. The worst part is, I can't get out of the house. The doors are either locked or led back into the same rooms. The windows won't break no matter what I throw at them. Sometimes there are other things in the dreams now. Last month, I dreamed I was hiding in a closet, and when I put my hand down to steady myself, I felt something soft and moving. When I looked down, my hand was covered in maggots that were crawling up my arm. I could feel each tiny leg as they moved across my skin. Another time, my dad was in the dream with me, and I watched as I don't even want to write what happened to him. It wasn't real, but I couldn't look him in the eye for days afterward. What freaks me out the most is that this might be more than just dreams. When I was a baby, before I could even remember anything, my mom told me she saw an old woman standing over my crib one night. She thought it was my grandmother at first, who was staying with us, but when she got closer, she realized it wasn't anyone she knew. The figure just vanished when my mom approached. My mom isn't the type to make up stories or believe in ghosts, so hearing her tell me this with such certainty in her voice really shook me. Our house in Ravenwood had other weird stuff happen too. When I was around 7, I started hearing whispering outside my bedroom door at night. It was too quiet to make out words, but it sounded like multiple people having a conversation. I'd call out to my parents thinking it was them, but they'd be sound asleep in their room. Then there was the man in the bathroom. I saw him 3 separate times when I was around 8. I'd be brushing my teeth or washing my hands, and in the mirror, I'd see a man standing in the shower behind me. He was tall with dark hair, wearing old-fashioned clothes. When I'd turn around, no one would be there, but when I looked back at the mirror, he'd still be standing there watching me. The 3rd time it happened, I screamed so loud my dad came running. After that, I refused to use that bathroom alone for months. My dad experienced things too, though he tried to hide it from me. Once I overheard him telling my mom that he'd come into the living room after everyone was in bed and seen the indentation of someone sitting in his favorite chair, like someone invisible had just gotten up when he walked in. The cushion slowly rose back to normal while he watched. He tried to laugh it off, but I could tell he was really disturbed. The worst incident happened when I was 9. My parents had gone to the neighbor's house for dinner, and I convinced them I was old enough to stay home alone for a couple hours. I was watching TV with our dog Rex when he suddenly started growling at the kitchen. His hackles went up and he stood staring at the island counter like he was seeing something I couldn't. I tried to call him back to me, but he wouldn't move. Then he started barking frantically, backing away. I got up to see what was wrong, and when I got to the kitchen entrance, I saw it. A dark figure crouched behind the island. It was like a shadow, but solid somehow, more dense than the darkness around it, and it was moving, shifting position as if it knew I was watching. Rex went ballistic, barking and snarling. I was frozen with fear until the thing started to stand up. It was tall, much taller than a normal person should be. That broke my paralysis and I ran. I didn't even grab my shoes or a jacket. I just bolted out the front door and ran to my dad's car in the driveway. He always left it unlocked in our small town. I climbed in and locked all the doors, ducking down in the back seat. After a few minutes, I peeked up at the house and saw a shadow moving back and forth in front of the dining room window. It wasn't my dog. Rex was still barking inside. This shadow was person-shaped, but wrong somehow, like its proportions were slightly off. I stayed in that car, shaking until my parents came home 30 minutes later. They searched the house but found nothing. My dad said Rex probably just saw a raccoon outside or something, but I know what I saw, and the way Rex was acting, he saw it too. We moved away from Ravenwood when I was 12 because of my dad's job. I thought maybe the dreams would stop once we left that house, but they didn't. They followed me. The only thing that changed was the outside of the dream house. Sometimes it looked like our new home, sometimes like my grandparents' place, sometimes like places I've never seen before. But inside, it's always the same house, with the same layout and the same feeling of dread. I've tried everything to stop these dreams. Sleep medications make it worse. They trap me in the dreams longer. Meditation before bed, dream catchers, sleeping with the lights on, nothing works. I even did a sleep study in college, but they just said I had unusually intense REM cycles and suggested stress management techniques. Last week, I had the worst dream yet. I was in the basement of the house, the part I fear most. It's always cold down there with concrete floors and walls that seem to sweat moisture. There's a single bulb hanging from the ceiling that swings slightly, creating moving shadows. In this dream, I was backed into a corner as I heard her coming down the stairs. Each step creaked under her weight, and I could hear her wheezing breath getting closer. Then she spoke, but not in the usual whisper. Her voice was clear, almost normal. "I've been patient, Eliza. 20 years is long enough." I felt something brush against my cheek, like dry, papery fingers. I screamed and tried to run past her, but the basement door slammed shut. The light bulb burst, plunging everything into darkness. In the pitch black, I felt her breath on my neck as she whispered, "It's time for you to stay here with me now." I woke up gasping, my heart pounding so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. The truly terrifying part? When I turned on my bedside lamp, there were 4 small bruises on my arm, like someone had grabbed me, perfectly spaced like finger marks. They faded after a couple days, but I took pictures because I needed proof I wasn't losing my mind. The dreams have been coming every night now, not just occasionally like before. I'm exhausted. I've started staying at my friend's place some nights because I'm afraid to sleep alone in my apartment. I haven't told her why, I just make excuses about my heating being broken or needing company. 2 nights ago, I dreamed I was in the kitchen of the house. The old woman was in the next room, but for once, she wasn't chasing me. She was sitting in a rocking chair, her back to me. All I could see was her gray hair in a bun and her bony shoulders moving slightly as she rocked. Then she started to turn around, and for the first time in 20 years, I thought I was finally going to see her face. Just as her profile came into view, my alarm went off and I woke up. But here's the thing that's making me question everything. When I went to make coffee that morning, the chairs at my kitchen table had been rearranged. One was pulled out, facing away from the table, exactly like the rocking chair in my dream. I live alone. No one else has keys to my apartment. I don't know what to do anymore. These aren't just dreams. Whatever this is, it's getting stronger, crossing over into my waking life. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if I'm actually awake right now, or if this is just another layer of the dream and she's still there, waiting. The worst part? Last night I dreamed I was writing this exact post, sharing my story, and when I finished typing and looked up from my computer, she was standing right behind me, her reflection visible in my dark screen. I'm terrified to turn around right now. Story 8. I still can't explain what happened to me that day when I was 11. It's been almost 15 years, but the memory is still crystal clear, like it happened yesterday. I've never told many people about this because I know how it sounds, but I swear every word of this is true. I grew up in Manila, in a small house that was attached to my father's guardhouse at this wood factory where he worked. It wasn't fancy or anything, but it was home. The factory had this massive metal gate that I used to play with all the time. It was probably not the safest thing for a kid to be messing with, but when you're 11, you don't really think about that stuff. That particular day was just like any other hot summer day in Manila. School was out, and I was bored out of my mind. My dad was working, cutting the grass around the property with this super loud machine. The noise was deafening, which is probably why he didn't hear anything when it happened. I remember walking outside, the heat immediately making my skin sticky with sweat. There wasn't much to do around there, so I wandered over to the gate like I always did. It was this huge sliding gate made of metal, really heavy, but I'd figured out that if I pushed it just right, I could make it move. The gate sat on these wheels that ran along a track, and I loved the feeling of putting my weight on it and being lifted slightly as it rolled up the track, then the slight falling sensation as it came back down. I'd been playing with the gate for maybe 15 minutes, just going back and forth. I remember looking down at my feet and seeing this heart-shaped piece of steel that was part of the gate's design. I thought it was pretty, so I stepped on it, balancing with one foot, then both. The metal was hot from the sun, but I didn't care. That's literally the last thing I remember before everything went black. When I came to, I was so confused. My head was throbbing and I could feel something wet running down my face. I reached up and my fingers came away red with blood. My left thigh was swollen and painful, and I couldn't move properly. But the weirdest part, I wasn't anywhere near the gate anymore. Somehow, I was several feet away, lying on the ground. I tried to sit up and felt dizzy. I called out for my dad, but the grass-cutting machine was still roaring and he couldn't hear me. I had to wait there, bleeding and scared, until he finally turned it off and saw me. The look on his face when he ran over to me, I'll never forget it. Pure panic. He kept asking me what happened, but I couldn't tell him because I had no idea myself. All I knew was that 1 second I was playing with the gate, and the next I was waking up injured on the ground. But here's where it gets really weird. The gate wasn't where it was supposed to be either. This massive heavy metal gate had somehow moved down the road, and I don't mean just a little bit. It was a good distance away from its track. My dad later told me it would have taken at least 3 grown men to move that thing off its track. He rushed me to the hospital, and I got 6 stitches on my forehead. The doctors checked me for a concussion and examined my swollen thigh, but they couldn't explain what had happened either. In fact, they seemed confused by my injuries. See, if the gate had fallen on me, which was my dad's first assumption, I should have had way more injuries. The gate was metal and weighed hundreds of pounds. It should have crushed me, but apart from the cut on my head and my swollen thigh, I was fine. No broken bones, no major bruising where the gate would have hit me. The doctors suggested I might have fainted and hit my head on something, but I'd never fainted before in my life, and I haven't since, and that still wouldn't explain how the gate ended up where it did. When we got home that evening, my dad and a couple of his co-workers had to work together to get the gate back on its track. They kept looking at me weird, like they thought I was hiding something, but I honestly had no memory of what happened during those missing moments. That night I couldn't sleep. My head hurt, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw that heart-shaped steel piece. I kept trying to piece together what could have happened, but nothing made sense. The next day, my dad asked our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Santos, to watch me while he went to work. She was this old lady who everyone said could see spirits. I never believed in that stuff before, but when I told her what happened, or what I remembered of it, she got this serious look on her face. "Isabella," she said, using my full name, which nobody ever did, "you were protected." I asked her what she meant, and she explained that spirits sometimes watch over children, especially in dangerous situations. She believed that when the gate was about to fall on me, which would have been really bad, maybe even killed me, something moved both me and the gate out of the way. I remember laughing nervously, telling her that was impossible, but she just shook her head and said, "There are many things in this world we cannot explain, Anak." She told me stories about other inexplicable things that had happened around our neighborhood over the years. A baby who was found outside after a fire with no burns at all. A boy who fell from a 3-story building but landed without a scratch. She believed these weren't just lucky accidents, but interventions from the spirit world. I didn't know what to believe then, and honestly, I still don't, but I can't explain what happened that day. My dad had a more practical theory. He thought maybe the gate had started to fall and I'd instinctively jumped out of the way, hitting my head in the process. But that doesn't explain how I ended up so far from the gate, or how the gate itself moved off its track. One of my dad's co-workers suggested that maybe the gate fell and bounced in a weird way, throwing me clear of it. But physics doesn't work like that, especially not with something as heavy as that gate. For weeks afterward, I had nightmares about it. In my dreams, I could see what happened in those missing moments. The gate tipping over, coming down toward me in slow motion, but just before it crushed me, everything would freeze, and I'd feel these hands grabbing me, pulling me to safety. I'd wake up sweating, feeling the phantom touch of those hands on my arms. I stopped playing near the gate after that. In fact, I avoided going near it at all. Something about it freaked me out, like it was watching me. Sometimes when I'd walk past it on my way to school, I'd feel this cold spot right next to it, even on the hottest days. My dad eventually installed a new gate, a lighter one with a better track system. He said it was safer, but I think he was freaked out by what happened too, even if he never admitted it. A few months after the incident, something else weird happened. I was helping my dad clean up the yard when I found the heart-shaped piece of metal from the old gate. It had somehow broken off and was lying in the grass. My dad said it must have come loose when they were moving the gate back onto its track, but I'm not so sure. It felt like, I don't know, like a message or something. I kept that piece of metal. It's still in my drawer today, a reminder of something I can't explain. As I got older, I tried to come up with logical explanations for what happened. Maybe I did faint, and the gate coincidentally fell off its track at the same time. Maybe there was an earthquake tremor that I didn't notice that moved both me and the gate. Maybe someone was there who helped me but ran away before my dad found me. But none of these explanations feel right. They all have holes in them, things they can't account for. The most logical explanation I can come up with is that I was somehow moved by something or someone that I couldn't see. Whether it was spirits, as Mrs. Santos believed, or something else entirely, I don't know. What I do know is that if I had stayed where I was, if the gate had fallen directly on me, I probably wouldn't be here writing this now. Whatever happened in those missing moments saved my life. Sometimes I still get a weird feeling, like I'm being watched over. It's not scary anymore. It's actually kind of comforting. Like whatever helped me that day is still around, still looking out for me. I've never had another experience like that one. No more missing time, no more unexplainable movements or injuries, but I've never forgotten it either. So was I played by spirits or ghosts that day? Were they messing with me or saving me? I honestly don't know. All I know is that something happened that I can't explain, and it's made me wonder about all the things in this world that we don't understand. That heart-shaped piece of metal sits in my drawer like a question that will never be answered. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some things are meant to remain mysteries. Story 9. I still can't believe what happened to me about 4 years ago. I've been reluctant to share this because it sounds so crazy, but I need to tell someone who might understand or have experienced something similar. I was staying at my grandma's house in Rockwood during spring break. If you've never heard of Rockwood, I'm not surprised. It's barely a dot on the map, just a handful of houses scattered across a rural area with more cows than people. My grandma's house sits on about 2 acres of land, with the closest neighbor being about half a mile down the road. It's the kind of place where the darkness at night is absolute. No streetlights, just stars when the sky is clear. That night, I was up late texting my friend Kyle about some video game we were both into at the time. Grandma had fallen asleep on the smaller couch across from me while watching some late-night TV show. I remember it was around 3 in the morning, which wasn't unusual for me back then. I was 19 and keeping vampire hours was my specialty. The TV was playing some stupid infomercial, and I was sprawled out on the big couch, phone in hand, when I noticed something odd. There was this bright white light coming through the living room window. At first, I thought nothing of it, figured it was just a reflection from the TV or maybe from the small decorative mirror my grandma had hanging on the wall. But then the TV went to a dark commercial and the light was still there. It actually seemed to be getting brighter. I sat up, suddenly alert. The light wasn't inside the house. It was definitely coming from outside and shining in. My first thought was that someone had pulled up with their headlights pointing at the house, but this light was different. It was pure white, almost bluish white, and it didn't have the yellowish tint that car headlights have. I got up and moved closer to the window, and that's when my heart nearly stopped. What I saw wasn't headlights. It was a massive bar of white light. I'm talking huge, like as tall as a cow and as long as a school bus. This thing was just hovering outside, moving slowly across the front of the house. The light wasn't piercing or blinding. It didn't shoot beams into the room like a spotlight would. It was more like this massive glowing rectangle that gave off this weird ambient light. I could see it clearly through the thin curtains we had. What freaked me out even more was that as I watched it move past the living room window, I could simultaneously see it through the kitchen window on the side of the house. It was like this thing was flowing around the property, maintaining the same distance from the walls as it moved. My mouth went completely dry. I wanted to wake up my grandma so badly. She was right there, sleeping peacefully on the other couch not 10 feet away from me. But I couldn't move. I literally couldn't make my legs work. It wasn't like in dreams where you try to run but can't. This was different. I was fully awake, but my body just wouldn't respond. I stood there frozen, watching this impossible light slide past the windows. There was no sound. That's another thing that still bothers me. Whatever this light was, it made absolutely no noise. No humming, no electrical buzz, nothing. Just this eerie silence that made the whole thing even more terrifying. I remember thinking I should grab my phone and take a video, but my arms felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds each. All I could do was stand there and watch as this thing moved from the front of the house toward the back. The light maintained its perfect rectangular shape the entire time. It didn't flicker or change intensity. It just kept its steady pace, moving around the house like it was, I don't know, scanning it or something. As it passed by the kitchen window, I could see how it illuminated the backyard. Our old oak tree was completely bathed in this white light, casting weird shadows that didn't seem to match the direction of the light source. It was like the shadows were moving independently of the light, which doesn't make any sense, I know. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the light completed its path around the house and was gone. 1 second it was there, and the next, nothing. Just the normal darkness of the rural night. The moment the light disappeared, my grandma sat bolt upright on the couch, not gradually waking up, not stirring slowly. She just snapped from sleeping to fully awake in an instant. Her eyes were wide, and she looked directly at me. I realized I was shaking. Not just a little tremor, but full body shakes like I was freezing. My eyes were wet. I'd started crying without even realizing it. The fear just hit me all at once, and I collapsed back onto the couch. "What's wrong, Jason?" my grandma asked, her voice oddly calm. I tried to explain what I'd seen, my words tumbling out in a jumbled mess. There was this light, this huge white light outside. It went all around the house. I couldn't move. It was just there, and then it was gone. She just looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she asked, "What color was the light?" The question struck me as strange. Of all the things to ask, how big it was, what shape, what it did, she wanted to know the color. "White," I said. "Just white, really bright white." Something in her face changed then. It was subtle, but I saw her shoulders relax a little. "Don't worry about it," she said, reaching for her glass of water on the side table. "You're safe." That was it. No explanation, no follow-up questions, just don't worry about it. Like I'd seen a raccoon in the yard instead of whatever the hell that light was. I grabbed my phone, planning to text Kyle about what had happened, and that's when I noticed something that sent another chill down my spine. The time on my phone read 4:15 in the morning. More than an hour had passed since I'd last checked it, but the encounter with the light felt like it had lasted maybe 5 minutes at most, and there were notifications. 7 text messages from Kyle, 3 from another friend, and even a missed call from my mom, who was in a different time zone and sometimes forgot about the time difference. I hadn't heard any of these come in. My phone wasn't on silent. I double-checked. The volume was up, notifications were enabled, but I hadn't heard a single one. "Grandma," I said, my voice shaking, "did you hear my phone going off at all while you were asleep?" She shook her head. No, I didn't hear anything until just now when I woke up. This was the woman who would wake up if you breathed too loudly in her house. She once heard a mouse in the kitchen from her bedroom at the other end of the house. There's no way she would have slept through multiple text notifications and a phone call. I tried asking her more about the light, if she'd seen anything like it before, why she asked about the color, why she seemed so calm about it, but she just kept deflecting. It's nothing to worry about, she'd say, or some things don't need explaining. The rest of that night, neither of us went back to sleep. We sat in the living room with all the lights on, watching old sitcoms until the sun came up. We never directly talked about the light again, but every so often I'd catch her looking out the windows, like she was checking for something. I've tried to find rational explanations for what I saw. It couldn't have been a car. The light was too big, too uniformly rectangular, and moved in a way no vehicle could on my grandma's property. There are no roads that go around her house like that. It wasn't a helicopter spotlight. No sound, wrong shape, and we're not near any areas where police helicopters operate regularly. It wasn't some weird electrical transformer explosion. Those are bright flashes, not sustained light sources that move with precision. The missing hour bothers me the most. I wasn't drunk, wasn't on any medication, and hadn't fallen asleep. I was wide awake, texting actively, and then an hour just vanished. And during that hour, my phone received multiple notifications that neither of us heard. I've been back to my grandma's house many times since then, but I've never seen the light again. I've also never stayed up until 3 in the morning there again. I make sure I'm asleep well before midnight. Sometimes I wonder if my grandma knows more than she let on. The way she asked about the color, the immediate relief when I said white, her cryptic responses, it feels like she's encountered something similar before, or at least heard about it. The strangest part, about a month after it happened, I was helping her clean out a closet and found an old journal that belonged to my grandfather, who passed away when I was a kid. I only managed to read a few pages before she noticed and took it away, but one entry caught my eye. It mentioned the lights and how they come and go as they please. My grandma saw me reading it and practically snatched it from my hands, telling me those were private memories. I've tried researching similar experiences online, but nothing quite matches what I saw. Some UFO accounts come close, but most involve different shaped lights or actual craft sightings. What I saw was just this perfect rectangle of light. No visible source, no craft, just the light itself. 4 years later, and I still don't have any answers. I still get chills thinking about it. Sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night, I'll see a car's headlights sweep across my ceiling and freeze up, thinking for a split second that it's happening again. I've never experienced anything like it since, and part of me hopes I never will. Whatever that light was, whatever happened during that missing hour, it's left me with this constant feeling that there are things in this world we don't understand and maybe aren't meant to. And sometimes those things come to visit in the dead of night, when there's no one around to see them except for a teenager texting his friend and an old woman who knows more than she's willing to say. Story 10. I've been hesitant to share this for years. I still don't know what happened to me that night, and I'm not sure I want to know. But the memory has been eating at me, and I need to get it out there, even if no one believes me. This happened about 3 years ago when I was stuck in Quito, Ecuador. I'd been living in Colombia with my wife for about 2 years, but I ran into some serious visa issues during a business trip to Ecuador. What should have been a 3-day visit turned into a bureaucratic nightmare. Some paperwork was missing. Then there was a problem with my passport, and suddenly I was told I couldn't return to Colombia until everything was sorted out. My wife was freaking out back in Medellin, and I was scrambling to find somewhere to stay because I couldn't afford a hotel for what was looking like weeks of waiting. After a few days of desperation, I found this apartment through a local I met at a cafe who knew someone renting short-term. It was cheap enough, but the minute I walked in, something felt off. The place was old, probably built in the 70s or 80s, with this weird layout that made no architectural sense. When you walked in the front door, there was this tiny kitchen immediately to your right, not even a proper kitchen. just a sink, a mini fridge, and a two-burner stove crammed into what felt like a closet. Straight ahead stretched this long, narrow living room with a single couch and a coffee table that had these weird water stains. The walls were this faded yellow that might have been white at some point, and there was almost no decoration except for a single painting of the Quito skyline that looked like it came from a tourist shop. Then there was this small hallway that led to the only bedroom, which had an ensuite bathroom. The bedroom was the most normal part of the place, just a double bed, a nightstand, and a small dresser. The bathroom was tiny but functional, with a shower that only gave hot water for about 5 minutes before turning ice cold. But the apartment had this atmosphere. I know how that sounds, but I'm not a superstitious person. I've never believed in ghosts or anything like that. My wife's Colombian family is super into that stuff, always talking about spirits and energies and cleansing rituals, but I always just nodded along to be polite. I'm from Chicago, raised by practical parents who thought ghost stories were for kids and movies. Yet something about this place made me uncomfortable from day one. During the day, it was fine. Sunlight would stream through the living room window, and everything seemed normal. But around 9:30 each night, without fail, the energy would shift. The apartment would get colder, the shadows deeper, and I'd get this crawling sensation on the back of my neck like I was being watched. It got to the point where I'd make sure to grab anything I needed from the kitchen before 9:30, then lock myself in the bedroom until morning. I told myself it was just my imagination, just stress from the visa situation and being away from my wife, but I'd never reacted to a place like this before. By the third week, I was losing my mind with boredom and frustration. The embassy was moving at a glacial pace, and I'd explored every part of Quito I could reach on foot or by bus. I'd video call my wife every night, but the connection was terrible, and the conversations only made me more homesick. That particular night, the night it happened, I'd been drinking, not wasted, just a few beers at a bar near the apartment to kill time. On my way home, I stopped at McDonald's and got a Big Mac, something familiar that reminded me of home. I ate it while watching some show on my laptop, had another beer from the mini fridge, and went to bed around 11. I fell asleep quickly, which was unusual because I'd been having trouble sleeping most nights in that place. I don't know how long I was out when it happened. I woke up instantly, not gradually, not confused or groggy. 1 second I was asleep, the next I was wide awake with every nerve in my body firing. The room was pitch black except for the dim red glow of the digital clock on the nightstand showing 2:17 in the morning. And I absolutely knew I wasn't alone. There was no sound, no movement that I could see, but I had this overwhelming certainty that something was in the room with me. It wasn't like waking from a nightmare where you're confused about what's real. This was pure, clear awareness. Something was there. My eyes immediately darted to the right side of my bed, not randomly, but with purpose, like my subconscious had tracked something moving from the foot of the bed to that spot. I saw nothing in the darkness, but I felt a presence so strongly it made my skin prickle. I tried to sit up to reach for the lamp on the nightstand, but that's when it hit me. This intense pressure on my face, head, and neck. It wasn't like a hand pushing me down. It was more like an invisible force, similar to when you try to push two magnets together and they resist each other. It was pushing me deeper into my pillow, and I couldn't move. My mouth was open, but no sound came out. I tried to scream, to call for help, but it was like my voice had been stolen. The pressure continued, not painful exactly, but terrifying in its otherworldliness. I could still breathe, but barely, shallow little gasps that didn't seem to bring enough oxygen. 4, maybe 5 seconds passed like this, though it felt like an eternity. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the pressure vanished. My voice came back in a rush, and in a sleepy, half-suppressed tone that didn't sound like me at all, I yelled, "Fuck off," toward where I sensed the presence. I lunged for the lamp and switched it on, heart pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The light flooded the room, revealing nothing, just my rumpled sheets, the empty corners of the room, the closed bathroom door. Whatever had been there, if anything had been there, was gone. I sat there shaking for what must have been an hour. I didn't dare turn the light off again. I checked my phone, 2:23, and considered calling my wife, but realized it would be the middle of the night in Colombia too. What would I even say? That I thought a ghost attacked me. When morning finally came, I was exhausted, but too wired to sleep. I packed a bag with essentials and went to a cafe as soon as it opened, staying there until afternoon. I told myself it had been sleep paralysis. I'd read about it before, how people wake up unable to move, often with a sense of a threatening presence nearby, the rational explanation, but it didn't feel like paralysis. I could move my eyes, my breathing wasn't completely restricted, and most importantly, I'd never had sleep paralysis before or since, and the way I knew exactly where to look when I woke up, like something had moved there deliberately. When I finally returned to the apartment that evening, I went straight to the bedroom and examined everything. The windows were still locked from the inside, the front door had been double locked, and I'd been alone in the apartment. There was no rational explanation for what I'd felt. That night, I slept with all the lights on, the TV playing in the background, and a kitchen knife on my nightstand. Nothing happened, but I didn't sleep more than 20 minutes at a stretch. The next day, against all my rational instincts, I found myself at a local market buying white sage because I remembered my mother-in-law saying it could cleanse spaces of negative energy. I felt ridiculous burning it in each room, waving the smoke into corners while saying aloud, "You are not welcome here." But I was desperate enough to try anything. I lasted 3 more nights in that apartment before my visa issues were finally resolved. Nothing as intense as that night happened again, but the feeling of being watched never went away. Twice more I woke up at almost the exact same time, 2:17, 2:18, with that same instant alertness, that same certainty that something was in the room, but whatever it was, kept its distance. On my last night, as I packed my bags for my early morning flight back to Colombia, I felt the apartment grow cold around 9:30 as usual. I spoke aloud to the emptiness. "I'm leaving tomorrow. This place is yours again." I don't know why I said it, but it felt necessary somehow. When I told my wife about what happened, she immediately called her mother, who listened intently before declaring that I'd encountered a demon. She insisted on performing a limpia, a spiritual cleansing ritual, on me when I got back. I went along with it to ease their minds, though I wasn't convinced. 3 years later, I still don't know what happened in that apartment in Quito. Was it sleep paralysis, heightened by stress and unfamiliar surroundings? Was it some kind of waking dream, or was it something more, something that defies the rational world I've always believed in? All I know is that sometimes when I'm drifting off to sleep, I get that same sensation of being watched, and my eyes automatically dart to the right side of the bed even though there's nothing there, there's never anything there. But sometimes, in that space between wakefulness and sleep, I wonder if I brought something back with me from Quito, something that's still waiting for the right moment to make itself known again. Story 11. I've never considered myself particularly sensitive to the paranormal. Sure, I've been fascinated by it, enough to call myself a paranormal investigator, but I've always approached these things with a healthy dose of skepticism. That changed about 6 months ago at Guy's Cliff House in Warwick. What happened there, I still struggle to make sense of it. For those who don't know, Guy's Cliff House is this massive, partially ruined mansion dating back to medieval times. It's got this heavy atmosphere even on a sunny day. I'd heard stories about it for years. Apparitions, cold spots, disembodied voices, the usual stuff you hear about old English buildings with long histories. But I never expected to become part of those stories myself. My mother has always been into this stuff more than me. She's the reason I got interested in paranormal investigation in the first place. When she mentioned that a medium was organizing a séance at Guy's Cliff House, I agreed to go mostly to humor her. My brother Adam decided to come too, probably just to make sure Mum didn't get carried away. There was also this other guy, can't even remember his name now, who'd been on a few investigations before. We arrived at Guy's Cliff around 7 in the evening. It was October, so already dark. The place looks imposing enough in daylight, but at night, with just the security lights casting long shadows across the stone facade, it's something else entirely. The caretaker met us at the gate and led us through the grounds to a side entrance. I remember the gravel crunching under our feet and the smell of damp earth. The medium, her name was Elaine, was already setting up in this room on the first floor. It wasn't particularly large, maybe 15 feet square, with a massive oak table in the center. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, peeling in places to reveal plaster beneath. There was a single light fixture hanging from the ceiling, giving off this weak yellowish glow that barely reached the corners of the room. This used to be part of the servants' quarters, Elaine explained as we entered. There's been a lot of activity reported here over the years. I remember nodding politely, while mentally preparing for an evening of nothing happening. In my experience, séances usually involved a lot of sitting in the dark while someone tried to sense spirits. I was expecting more of the same. We took our places around the table, me, Mum, Adam, the other guy, and Elaine. The table was large enough that we couldn't quite reach across it, so we linked hands to form the circle. Elaine had placed a few candles around the room, which cast these weird, flickering shadows on the walls. She dimmed the ceiling light, but didn't turn it off completely. "Before we begin," Elaine said, "I want to explain that this location has a particularly strong energy. Guy's Cliff House has seen a lot of history, some of it dark. We need to be respectful of any entities we might encounter." I remember catching Adam's eye across the table and seeing him suppress a smirk. Like me, he was there mainly for Mum's sake. Elaine began with the usual stuff, asking for protection, inviting benevolent spirits to communicate, that sort of thing. For the first 20 minutes or so, nothing happened. My legs were starting to cramp from sitting still, and I was already thinking about the drive home. Then the temperature in the room dropped. I don't mean it got a bit chilly. It plummeted. I could suddenly see my breath in front of my face, and my fingers, still linked with Mum's and the other guys, felt like ice. I'd experienced cold spots during investigations before, but nothing this extreme or sudden. "There's someone with us," Elaine said quietly. "I can feel a male presence. He's not happy." I was about to ask a question when I felt this weird pressure in my head, like when your ears need to pop but won't. It started as a dull ache at the base of my skull and then spread upward until it felt like my whole head was in a vice. I remember opening my mouth to say something, but no sound came out. The next thing I recall clearly is Adam shouting my name. I blinked, confused, and realized everyone was staring at me. Mum looked terrified. The circle had been broken. They'd let go of my hands. James, are you with us?" Elaine was leaning across the table toward me, her face pale. "What happened?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, raspy like I'd been shouting. You weren't responding," Mum said. Her hand was clutching her necklace, something she does when she's anxious. "Your eyes rolled back in your head and you started making these noises." "What noises?" Nobody answered immediately. Adam finally said, "Like choking or gasping. It didn't sound human." I had no memory of this, none whatsoever. The last thing I remembered was feeling the headache coming on, and then suddenly everyone was staring at me. According to them, I'd been unresponsive for nearly 15 minutes. "I need to speak with James alone," Elaine said to the others. "Could you wait outside for a moment?" After they left, looking reluctant, Elaine sat beside me. Her hands were shaking slightly as she poured me a glass of water from a bottle in her bag. "What do you remember?" she asked. "Nothing after the headache started. It was like I blacked out." She nodded as if she'd expected this. "James, I believe you experienced what we call spontaneous mediumship. Sometimes spirits find certain people easier to connect with, even people who don't consider themselves psychically sensitive." I took a sip of water, my throat feeling unexpectedly raw. So what? I was possessed? That's not possible. Not possession exactly, more like he was trying to use you as a conduit to communicate. Who? Who was trying to communicate? Elaine hesitated. He didn't give a name, but he showed me images. I believe it was the hangman. The hangman. Guy's Cliff has a dark history. During times when the estate served as a military installation, there was a man responsible for carrying out executions of prisoners. He took pride in his work. I felt suddenly nauseous. The water in my glass rippled as my hand trembled. Why would he try to connect with me? I'm not even a medium. That's exactly why. Untrained, your natural defenses are lower, and there might be something about your energy that drew him to you. I wanted to dismiss it all, to tell her it was just low blood sugar or something making me zone out. But the look on Mum's and Adam's faces when they came back in, they'd seen something happen to me that had genuinely frightened them. We cut the séance short after that. On the drive home, I tried to joke about it, to lighten the mood, but no one seemed in the mood for humor. Mum kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, as if checking I was still me. That night was when the real nightmare began. I got home around 11, exhausted but strangely wired. I remember standing in my bathroom brushing my teeth when I caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror that wasn't me. Just a shadow there and gone in an instant. I convinced myself it was nothing. I got into bed around midnight, switched off the light, and almost immediately felt wrong. Not scared exactly, just wrong, like someone was in the room with me. I switched the light back on, but of course no one was there. This happened 3 more times before I finally left the light on and managed to fall into a fitful sleep. The dreams started that night. I was in a dark space, not a room exactly, more like a void, and I could feel hands around my neck, squeezing, not trying to kill me, more like measuring, like someone sizing up my neck for something. I woke up gasping for air at around 3 in the morning. My bedroom felt ice cold, just like that room at Guy's Cliff had been. I swear I could smell the same musty scent of that old house, even though I was miles away in my own flat. This pattern continued for weeks. I couldn't sleep with the lights off anymore. The dreams got more detailed. I'd see flashes of a stone room, hear the sound of a rope being pulled taut. Sometimes I'd hear whispering, too quiet to make out the words, but persistent, always just at the edge of my hearing. The worst part, though, was the compulsion. About a week after the séance, I started feeling this overwhelming urge to go back to Guy's Cliff house, not just to visit. I needed to go back to that specific room, alone. The feeling would come over me at random times, while driving, at work, in the shower. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch, growing more intense by the day. I found myself researching the history of Guy's Cliff obsessively, looking for mentions of executions or a hangman. There wasn't much concrete information, but I did find references to the estate being used as a military installation during various conflicts, including housing prisoners of war at one point. After about 2 weeks of this, I broke down and called Elaine. She listened patiently as I described what was happening, then said something that chilled me even more. "He's not finished with you, James. The connection wasn't completed during the séance. He's trying to finish what he started. How do I make it stop?" I remember the desperation in my voice. "You need to go back," she said. "But not alone, never alone. That's what he wants." She arranged to meet me at Guy's Cliff the following weekend, along with a colleague of hers who specialized in what she called spiritual clearing. I counted the days, barely sleeping, jumping at every shadow and noise in my flat. The night before we were due to meet, the dreams changed. Instead of being the victim, I was the hangman. I could feel his satisfaction as he worked, the pride in a job well done. I woke up with my hands cramped, as if they'd been gripping something tightly for hours. The return to Guy's Cliff is still a blur in my memory. I remember the drive there feeling like I was moving through molasses. Time seemed to stretch and contract. Elaine and her colleague, an older man named Gerald, met me at the entrance. Gerald took one look at me and said, "He's carrying a shadow." Not the most reassuring thing to hear. We went back to the same room, but this time they had brought various items: herbs, crystals, small bowls of salt. They performed what they called a severance ritual, designed to break the connection between me and whatever had attached itself to me at the séance. I wish I could say it was dramatic, that candles flickered or objects moved, but it was actually quite anticlimactic. Gerald spoke some words, Elaine burned some herbs, and I sat in a chair feeling increasingly foolish. But then, the pressure lifted. It was like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even realized was there until it was gone. The compulsion to return to the room vanished. The coldness that had seemed to follow me everywhere disappeared. That was 6 months ago. I'd like to say everything went immediately back to normal, but that wouldn't be true. I still can't sleep with the lights off. I still wake up sometimes with that sensation of hands at my throat. But it's fading, gradually. What haunts me more than anything is those 15 minutes I lost during the séance. What happened? What did I do or say? Nobody will tell me exactly, not even Adam, who's usually brutally honest about everything. They just say, "I wasn't myself," which is probably the most terrifying phrase I've ever heard. I haven't been back to Guy's Cliff since, and I don't plan to. My days as a paranormal investigator are over. Some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed again. I still don't know if I believe in possession or spirits or any of it, really. But something happened to me in that room, something I can't explain, and not knowing is the scariest part of all. Story 12. I've lived in Lancaster County my whole life. Elizabethtown is a small place where everybody knows your business, and the old stories get passed around like recipes. I never paid much attention to the local ghost stories until last October. Now, I can't stop thinking about what I saw. I was having a really rough time after my divorce finalized in September. My ex got the house, and I ended up moving back to my hometown, renting a small apartment near the Amtrak station. I could hear the trains at night, which was oddly comforting, reminded me of staying at my grandparents' place as a kid. One night, I couldn't sleep. It was around 2 in the morning, and I decided to take a walk to clear my head. It was mid-October, cool but not cold yet, the kind of fall night where you just need a light jacket. I didn't really have a destination in mind, just wandering through the quiet streets. I found myself heading toward the old railroad bridge where Turnpike Road crosses High Street. I don't know why I went that way. Maybe because my grandfather used to tell me to stay away from there when I was a kid. "Bad things happen at that bridge," he'd say. I always thought he was just worried I'd get hit by a train. The streets were completely empty. Elizabethtown basically shuts down after 10, especially on weeknights. There were streetlights, but they seemed dimmer than usual, casting these weird shadows across the pavement. The closer I got to the bridge, the more uneasy I felt. Not scared exactly, just like something wasn't right. When I reached the intersection, I stopped and looked up at the bridge. It's not particularly impressive, just an old railroad overpass, the kind you see all over Pennsylvania. But standing there alone in the dark, it seemed bigger somehow, more significant. I remember checking my phone. It was 2:37. I was about to turn around and head back to my apartment when I saw it, a faint purple glow coming from underneath the bridge. At first, I thought someone had put up some kind of decorative lights for Halloween, but as I watched, the light seemed to pulse, like it was breathing. And it wasn't coming from any fixed point I could see. It was just there, floating beneath the bridge. I'm not proud to admit it, but my first thought was that I was hallucinating. I hadn't been sleeping well since the divorce, and stress can do weird things to your brain. I actually rubbed my eyes like in a cartoon, but when I looked again, the light was still there. I started walking closer, staying on the sidewalk that runs alongside High Street. The purple glow got brighter as I approached. It wasn't blinding or anything, just this soft violet light that didn't seem to illuminate anything around it. It was just light, existing. When I was about 50 feet away, the light suddenly flared brighter and I stopped dead in my tracks. That's when I heard it, the faintest sound of a child crying, not sobbing or wailing, just this soft, heartbreaking whimper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My skin broke out in goosebumps and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits or any of that stuff. At least I didn't think I did. But in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was not alone. I wanted to turn and run, but something kept me rooted to the spot. The purple light started to take shape, forming what looked like the silhouette of a small child. Not solid, more like purple mist in the vague shape of a boy. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. The crying stopped and the figure just hovered there. I couldn't make out any features, just this boy-shaped purple haze. Then it started moving, slowly drifting from beneath the bridge up toward the tracks. I found my voice and called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded weird and thin in the night air. The figure paused, and I swear it turned toward me. The purple light brightened again, and for just a second I thought I could see a face, a young boy with hollow eyes and a mouth twisted in, not pain exactly, more like confusion, like he didn't know where he was or how he got there. Then I heard the distant rumble of an approaching train. Not the Amtrak. This was a freight train, the kind that passes through Elizabethtown in the middle of the night. The purple figure suddenly shot upward onto the bridge itself. I could see it clearly now, standing in the middle of the tracks, facing the oncoming train. I yelled, "Get off the tracks!" Before I could stop myself. I knew it wasn't a real boy, couldn't be a real boy, but some instinct took over. The figure didn't move. The train's headlight appeared in the distance, growing brighter as it approached. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I fumbled for my phone, thinking I should call someone, though who you call about a ghost on the train tracks, I had no idea. I managed to open the camera app instead and started recording. The train was getting closer. The purple figure remained motionless on the tracks. Then, just as the train was about to reach the bridge, the light flared blindingly bright. I had to look away for a second, and when I looked back, the figure was gone. The train thundered across the bridge, oblivious. I stood there shaking, still recording as the train passed. When it was gone, and the night was quiet again, I lowered my phone and played back the video, half expecting to see nothing. But there it was, the purple light pulsing beneath the bridge. The video even caught the moment it brightened and seemed to take shape, though the boy figure wasn't as clear as what I'd seen with my own eyes, and then the final flare of light before the train arrived. What the video didn't capture was the sound of crying. I played it back 3 times with the volume all the way up, but there was nothing except the rumble of the approaching train and my own voice yelling stupidly at a ghost to get off the tracks. I hurried home after that, looking over my shoulder the whole way. Once I was safely back in my apartment, I sat on my bed and watched the video over and over. Each time, I noticed something different, the way the light seemed to spiral in on itself, how it moved in a way that didn't look random but purposeful, like it knew exactly what it was doing. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the stories my grandfather had told me about the bridge, how a boy had been killed there back in the 1930s, hit by a train while playing on the tracks. I always thought it was just one of those cautionary tales adults tell kids to keep them away from dangerous places. The next morning, I went to the local library. The librarian, Mrs. Hoffman, has been there forever. She was ancient when I was a kid, and somehow she's still working there. I asked her about the purple light on the railroad bridge. Her face got all serious, and she looked around like she was afraid someone would overhear us. "You saw it," she whispered. When I nodded, she sighed and said, "It was 1934, a boy named Thomas Aldridge, 8 years old. They say he was playing on the bridge when the train came, didn't have time to get off the tracks." "And the purple light?" I asked. "Some say it's his spirit," she said. "Unable to move on because of how sudden his death was. Others think it's some kind of warning, trying to prevent the same thing from happening to someone else." She paused. There are those who claim it's not at that bridge at all, but over at Bosler Road. Something about a mother who... She trailed off, shaking her head. But most of the sightings have been where you saw it. I showed her the video on my phone. Her hands trembled as she held it, and when it was over, she handed it back without a word. She didn't need to say anything. I could see in her eyes that she believed me. I went back to the bridge the next night, and the night after that, and every night for a week. I didn't see the purple light again, though I thought I caught glimpses of it out of the corner of my eye a couple of times. Just quick flashes of violet that disappeared when I turned to look directly at them. Then, exactly 1 week after my first encounter, I was standing beneath the bridge again around 3 in the morning. It was colder that night, and I'd brought a thermos of coffee to keep warm. I was about to give up and go home when I felt it. A drop in temperature so sudden my breath clouded in front of my face. The purple light appeared again, this time right next to me, so close I could have reached out and touched it. The same boy-shaped silhouette, but more defined this time. I could make out the outline of his clothes, short pants, a jacket, a cap pulled down over his ears, old-fashioned clothes, like from a black and white photo. I didn't run. I wasn't even scared, weirdly enough. I just stood there watching as the figure drifted around me in a slow circle. The crying started again, but it didn't sound sad anymore. It sounded lonely. Without thinking, I said, "I'm sorry about what happened to you, Thomas." The light flickered, and the crying stopped. The purple figure hovered in front of me, and I had the strangest feeling it was studying me. Then it moved closer, until it was only a few feet away. I could feel a slight tingling sensation on my skin, like static electricity. That's when my phone, which I'd been holding at my side, suddenly turned on by itself. The screen lit up, showing the camera app, but I hadn't touched it. The purple figure reached out, not with a hand exactly, but an extension of the light, and seemed to touch the phone. My screen went crazy, flashing through apps and settings faster than I could follow. Then it settled on my photo gallery and opened the video I'd taken the previous week. The video started playing on its own, showing the purple light on the bridge. The figure beside me made a sound, not crying this time, but something like a sigh. Then it backed away, drifting toward the bridge again. I followed, still not feeling afraid, just intensely curious. When we reached the spot where the tracks run over the bridge, the figure stopped. It turned to face me one last time, and I swear I could see a smile form in that featureless purple haze. Then it pointed, not at me but past me, toward town. I turned to look, and when I turned back, the light was gone. My phone was still on, still showing the video I'd taken. But as I watched, the video began to distort. The image twisted and warped, colors inverting, until finally the screen went black. When I tried to turn it back on, nothing happened. The battery was completely drained. I went back to my apartment and plugged in my phone. When it finally had enough charge to turn on again, I immediately checked for the video. It was gone, not just deleted from my gallery, but completely erased from my phone, like it had never existed. I've gone back to the bridge many times since then, but I've never seen the purple light again. Sometimes I think I can hear faint crying when a train passes overhead, but it could just be the wind in the metal supports. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know if I really saw the ghost of Thomas Aldridge or if I was just stressed and sleep-deprived enough to hallucinate the whole thing. But I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. And sometimes, when I'm walking through town at night, I feel like someone's watching me. Not in a threatening way, more like they're checking to make sure I'm okay. I still don't have an explanation for any of it. The purple light, the crying, my phone turning on by itself, none of it makes logical sense. But logic doesn't always apply in Elizabethtown, especially not at that old railroad bridge. All I know is that something happened to me that I can't explain. And every time I hear a train in the night, I think about a little boy in purple light who's been waiting almost 90 years for someone to notice him. Story 13. I've never written about this before, but I need to get it off my chest. I still get goosebumps thinking about it, and honestly, I'm not sure how to process what happened to my husband Martin 2 years ago. Some of you might think I'm crazy, but I swear every word of this is true. It started on a Tuesday like any other. Martin had been fighting what we thought was a bad cold or sinus infection for about a week. He's usually the type who never gets sick, maybe a cold once every couple years, so seeing him actually take sick days from work was unusual. The doctor prescribed antibiotics, saying it was probably a bacterial infection. Nothing to worry about, but by Friday something was clearly wrong. The antibiotics weren't helping. Martin was getting worse, not better. His fever kept spiking to 102, then 103. He was sleeping more and more, barely getting up except to use the bathroom. I remember sitting beside him Friday night, putting cold cloths on his forehead while he shivered under 3 blankets, wondering if we should go to the emergency room. But you know how it is. We kept thinking, it's just the flu, it'll pass. Saturday and Sunday were a blur. Martin slept almost constantly. I'd wake him every few hours to take his temperature, give him medicine, and try to get some water or soup into him. He was barely coherent when awake, just mumbling responses and falling right back to sleep. I called the doctor's after-hours line twice, and they just said to keep monitoring his fever and bring him in Monday if he wasn't better. By Monday morning, I was terrified. Martin had now been essentially unconscious for the entire weekend. He'd wake up just long enough to swallow some water or medicine, then slip back under. I managed to get him into the car and to the doctor's office, where they immediately ordered blood tests and gave him IV fluids for dehydration. The doctor seemed concerned but not alarmed, saying viral infections can sometimes knock people out like this. They prescribed different antibiotics and sent us home with instructions to return if he got worse. That night was when things started getting truly bizarre. I'd made a bed for Martin on the living room couch so I could check on him easily from the kitchen. Around 11 at night, I was washing dishes when I heard Martin talking, not mumbling like before, but having what sounded like an actual conversation. I hurried into the living room, thinking he must be feeling better, but he was still asleep, completely out, yet his lips were moving, and he was responding to nothing, to no one I could see. "I understand," he said clearly, "but I can't help you right now. I'm sick." Then silence, as if he was listening to someone respond. "No, I'm sorry. I don't speak Spanish well enough." More silence. I stood there, frozen, watching my husband have a full conversation in his sleep. After a minute or two, he quieted down, and I convinced myself it was just fever dreams, sleep talking. I went back to the kitchen but kept the door open so I could hear him. About an hour later it happened again. This time Martin's voice was louder, almost agitated. "Please, just let me sleep. I need to sleep to get better." I rushed in again. Same situation. Martin was completely asleep, but having what appeared to be a heated conversation with empty air. His eyes were closed, but his face was contorted like he was frustrated. His hands were gesturing weakly. "I told you, I don't understand what you're saying. I can't help if I don't understand." Then something that made my blood run cold. "There are too many of you. Please, one at a time." I tried waking him. I shook his shoulder gently at first, then harder. Nothing. He was burning up with fever again, but completely unresponsive to me while continuing to argue with whatever he was seeing. This happened 3 more times that night. By morning, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept, jumping at every sound from the living room. Martin had finally quieted down around 4 in the morning, falling into what seemed like actual restful sleep for the first time in days. Tuesday morning, Martin woke up on his own. Really woke up, eyes open, looking around. I was so relieved I started crying. "Hey," he said weakly. "Why are you crying?" I hugged him, told him how worried I'd been. He seemed confused about how long he'd been sick. When I told him it had been almost a week, he looked shocked. "They won't let me sleep," he said suddenly. "I keep asking them to please let me sleep." I felt that cold sensation again. "Who won't let you sleep, honey?" He looked at me like I should know. "Dead people. I keep seeing dead people. They're here in the living room asking me for help." They want me to give messages to their families. I thought he was still delirious with fever. I tried to laugh it off, but Martin shook his head. Jen, I'm not confused. I know how it sounds, but they've been here all night. Most of them speak Spanish. We live in San Antonio, which is predominantly Hispanic, and they keep apologizing that I can't understand them, but there's so many of them. He pointed to different empty spaces around our living room. There's an old woman there by the TV. She keeps showing me pictures of her grandchildren, and there's a teenage boy by the window who died in a car accident. He wants his mom to know it wasn't her fault. Martin had never been interested in paranormal stuff. He was always the practical one, the skeptic. Hearing him talk like this terrified me more than the fever. When he tried to stand up, he immediately collapsed. I barely caught him before he hit the floor. That was it. I was done waiting. I called an ambulance. In the ER, everything moved quickly. They took blood, hooked Martin up to monitors, started more IV fluids. A doctor came in looking alarmed, ordered more tests, then more doctors appeared. I sat in the corner, getting more frightened by the minute as medical staff rushed in and out. Finally, a doctor pulled me aside. Mrs. Reeves, your husband's white blood cell count is 400,000. I didn't understand what that meant at first. Normal is between 4,000 and 11,000, he explained. With a count this high, he should be in a coma or dead. We're honestly shocked he's conscious and talking. They diagnosed him with empeleukemia, a severe blood infection that had gone systemic. They admitted him immediately to the ICU, started him on powerful antibiotics, and warned me that the next 24 hours would be critical. That night in the hospital, I sat beside Martin's bed while he drifted in and out of consciousness. Around midnight, his eyes suddenly opened wide. He wasn't looking at me, but at the foot of his bed. I understand, he whispered, but I can't help you now. I'm too sick. My skin crawled. He was having another conversation with someone I couldn't see. Martin, I said, squeezing his hand. Who are you talking to? He glanced at me, then back at the empty space. The man in the suit. He says he died in this room last month. Heart attack. He wants me to tell his brother where he hid the family ring. Martin's monitors started beeping faster. His heart rate was climbing. There are more of them now, he whispered. They know I can see them. They're asking me to help them. I pressed the nurse call button frantically. They say I'm like them right now, Martin continued, his voice getting weaker. Halfway between, that's why I can see them. The monitors suddenly erupted in alarms. Martin's eyes rolled back and he went completely limp. A medical team rushed in, shoving me out of the way. I heard someone yell, "Code Blue," and then I was being pulled from the room by a nurse. For 15 minutes, I stood in the hallway, certain my husband was dying. A chaplain appeared, asking if I wanted to pray. I'm not religious, but I found myself nodding, grasping for anything that might help. Miraculously, they brought him back. The doctor later told me Martin's heart had stopped for nearly 2 minutes before they revived him. By all medical standards, he had been clinically dead. The strange thing is, after that episode, Martin's condition began to improve. The antibiotics finally seemed to take effect. His white blood cell count started dropping. Within 48 hours, he was stable enough to move out of the ICU. When Martin was fully conscious again, I hesitantly asked if he remembered seeing people during his illness. He looked uncomfortable but nodded. It sounds crazy, but they were as real as you are, he said. They knew they were dead. They wanted help communicating with people they'd left behind. I asked if he'd seen anything during his Code Blue episode, during those 2 minutes when his heart had stopped. They were there, he said quietly, but different. They weren't asking for help anymore. They were, he paused, searching for words. They were welcoming me, telling me it was okay to come with them. Martin made a full recovery, physically at least. The doctors called it miraculous given how high his infection levels had been. They said the infection had literally pushed him to the edge of death, where by all medical understanding, He should have already crossed over. But mentally, emotionally, something changed in him. He's more contemplative now. Sometimes I catch him staring at empty corners of rooms, though he denies seeing anything more. He started learning Spanish, saying only that it might be useful someday. I've researched near-death experiences since then. Many people report visions, tunnels of light, deceased relatives. But Martin didn't see any of that. He saw strangers, people needing help, messages delivered, and they came to him before his heart stopped, when he was sick but still alive. The doctors have a medical explanation: delirium from high fever and infection, hallucinations from metabolic disturbances as his body fought the massive infection, all very scientific and rational, but that doesn't explain how specific the visions were, how consistent over several days, or why they started before he was at death's door and continued until the moment he was revived. I can't help wondering if Martin's severe illness somehow lifted the veil between worlds. If being so close to death put him temporarily in a place where he could perceive those who had already crossed over, a place where the dead could recognize him as someone who could still return to the living, carrying their messages. I still sleep with the lights on sometimes. I still get chills thinking about those nights, listening to my husband speak to people who weren't there, people who, according to him, needed his help because they were dead, and sometimes, very rarely, I catch Martin looking at something I can't see, nodding slightly, as if acknowledging someone just out of my perception. Story 14. I've never shared this with anyone outside my family. Even typing this makes my hands shake. I'm not sure if putting this out there will help me process what happened or just bring it all back, but I need to tell someone who might understand. It all started about 7 years ago when I was working at Soundwave, this indie music store in upstate New York. I was 26, playing in a local punk band on weekends, and generally not taking life too seriously. My wife Maria and I had been married for 3 years by then. We had a 2-year-old son, Tyler, and Maria was pregnant with our daughter. This old man started coming into the shop regularly. He wasn't our typical customer, had to be at least 70, always wearing this weird handmade jewelry made from what looked like small animal bones. He'd browse the vinyl for hours, but rarely bought anything. One day, he approached the counter where I was working and placed a small bag of these bone beads he'd made. "Would you like to buy some of my crafts?" he asked. His voice had this weird raspiness to it. "Sorry, man, not really my thing," I said, trying to be polite. He kept staring at me with these pale blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. "What is your thing then, Dave?" I don't remember ever telling him my name. I was feeling uncomfortable and said something stupid just to break the tension. "I don't know, maybe a human skull for my drum kit stand. That would be pretty punk rock." I laughed it off. He didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly and said, "I can bring you one." I thought he was just a weird old dude and forgot about it. About 3 weeks later, he came back with a paper bag. "Your skull," he said, placing it on the counter. Then he walked out without another word. I thought it was a joke, but when I looked inside, there it was, a yellowish-brown human skull. It looked old, with a few teeth missing. I convinced myself it was a really good replica. It had to be, right? No way this was real. I stuck it in my backpack, thinking it would make a cool conversation piece. When I got home, Maria freaked out. She's Polish and grew up with all these superstitions her grandmother taught her. She wanted me to get rid of it immediately. "Dave, this is bad. You don't bring death into your home," she said, making the sign of the cross. She was 6 months pregnant and already stressed, so I didn't want to upset her more. "Fine, I'll put it in the basement for now," I said. I took it downstairs and set it on a shelf behind some boxes. To be honest, looking at it in our house felt different than at the store. It gave me a weird feeling too, so I was happy to forget about it. That's when things started happening. Maria's sister came to visit about a week later. She was playing with Tyler in the living room while Maria was cooking dinner. I was in the garage working on my bike. Suddenly I heard screaming. I ran inside to find Maria's sister completely pale. There was a little girl holding Tyler. She gasped. I turned around for 1 second to grab his toy, and when I looked back, There was a girl, maybe 8 or 9, with dark hair, holding him. When I screamed, she disappeared. Maria and I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was tired, maybe it was a shadow, but I could tell Maria believed her. That night, after her sister left, Maria confessed she'd seen the same little girl standing in the hallway outside Tyler's room a few days earlier. She thought she was imagining things and didn't want to scare me. Within a month, Maria started having night terrors. She would wake up screaming about men hiding in our closet or standing over our bed. The weird part was, in the morning, she wouldn't remember any of it. I'd tell her what happened, and she'd have no recollection at all. I started losing sleep. Every night around 3 in the morning, I'd hear footsteps going up and down our wooden staircase. Our house was built in the 1950s, one of those split levels with creaky floors. So at first I thought it was just the house settling, but the footsteps were too deliberate, too rhythmic. Sometimes they'd stop right outside our bedroom door. I'd open it, and no one would be there. Maria was struggling with her pregnancy and these weird occurrences, so I tried to keep things normal. I convinced myself there were logical explanations for everything. The footsteps were the house settling. The little girl was just our exhausted brains playing tricks on us. Maria's night terrors were just pregnancy hormones. Our daughter Emma was born that fall. For a few months, things seemed normal as life can be with a newborn and a toddler. We were too exhausted to notice anything strange, but as Emma got older, things got worse. When Emma turned 5, she started having the same night terrors as Maria. She'd wake up screaming about the sad girl who wanted to play with her. She started sleepwalking too. One night, around 3 in the morning, Maria woke me up, panicking because Emma wasn't in her bed. We found her sitting cross-legged in front of the TV in the living room. The TV wasn't on, but Emma was staring at the screen, giggling. "Emma, what are you doing?" Maria asked, picking her up. "I'm watching my show with my friend," Emma said, her eyes still fixed on the dark screen. "What friend, sweetie?" I asked. "The girl who lives in the basement. She says she wants to go outside and play with her friends, but she can't leave." Maria's face went white. She carried Emma back to bed while I checked the entire house, especially the basement. Nothing was out of place. The skull was still sitting on the shelf where I'd left it years ago. I'd almost forgotten it was there. That night, Maria reminded me about the skull. "It's that thing you brought home. We need to get rid of it," she insisted. I agreed, but when I went down to get it the next day, I couldn't find it. I tore apart the whole basement, but the skull was gone. I never told Maria. I didn't want to scare her more. I figured one of us must have moved it at some point and forgotten. About a month later, Maria's brother stayed over after we had a small get-together. He slept on the couch in the living room. In the morning, he asked if Maria was sleepwalking during the night. "I woke up around 3, he said, and Maria was standing at the bottom of the stairs, just staring straight ahead. I called her name, and she didn't respond. Then she just turned around and went back upstairs without saying anything." Maria had no memory of this. That's when I started to get really scared. This wasn't just weird coincidences anymore. The knocking started next. Subtle at first, just light tapping on the walls. Then it got louder, more insistent. It would start at the basement door and travel up the walls to the second floor. Sometimes it would follow me from room to room. I'd be alone in the house during the day while Maria was at work and the kids at school, and I'd hear knocking right behind my head, but when I turned around, nothing was there. One afternoon, I was in the basement looking for some tools when I heard a child's laughter. I spun around, and for a split second I saw her, a little girl with long dark hair and a dirty white dress. She was standing in the corner, partially hidden by shadows. When I blinked, she was gone. But the air where she'd been was ice cold. I ran upstairs and didn't go back down for days. Things between Maria and me got strained. We were both sleep-deprived and stressed. We started fighting about everything. I was spending more time at the music store or with my band trying to escape the house. Maria thought I was abandoning her and the kids. About 6 months of this hell, Maria told me she wanted a divorce. I didn't fight it. Some part of me thought if I left, whatever was happening would stop. Maybe it was attached to me somehow. Maria stayed in the house with the kids while I found an apartment. The weird thing is, after I moved out, the activity seemed to get worse. Maria would call me in the middle of the night, terrified because all the kitchen cabinets were open when she woke up, or because she heard someone whispering her name. Finally, she decided to move out too. We put the house up for sale and started packing up. I came over to help clear out the basement. We emptied everything, every box, every shelf, every corner. The skull never turned up. It was just gone. The last day before Maria and the kids moved to their new place, Emma went back to get her favorite stuffed animal she'd left behind. Maria waited in the car while Emma ran inside. Less than a minute later, Emma came tearing out of the house, her face white with terror. "I'm never going back in there," she sobbed. "Never." When Maria finally calmed her down, Emma said she felt someone grab her shoulder as soon as she stepped inside. She said it felt like the house itself was telling her to get out and never come back. We never went back. The real estate agent handled the rest of the sale. The house sold quickly, surprisingly enough. I've often wondered about the family that moved in, if they've experienced anything strange. The weird thing is, once we all moved out of that house, everything stopped. No more night terrors, no more sleepwalking, no more knocking or footsteps. It's like whatever was there stayed there. I've spent years trying to rationalize what happened. Maybe there was mold in the house that made us hallucinate. Maybe the stress of raising young kids while my marriage was falling apart affected my perception. But deep down, I know what we experienced was real. I still have nightmares about that little girl, and sometimes I wake up at exactly 3 in the morning for no reason. I never found out anything about the old man with the bone jewelry. He stopped coming to the music store right after he gave me the skull. I don't know what was attached to that skull or why it chose to torment us. All I know is I'll never ignore my wife's intuition again, and I'll never ever bring something like that into my home, no matter how fake I think it is. Story 15. I was 12 when we moved to Vail, Oregon. My mom had remarried, and with my 2 brothers and new stepsister, our blended family needed more space. We found this plain white house right behind the Dairy Queen. I remember being so excited about that part, ice cream whenever we wanted, but mostly I was just relieved. Our old house, this green monstrosity we all just called the greenhouse, had been difficult for me. Since I was little, I've seen things other people don't. My family knew something was up, but they chalked it up to an overactive imagination or anxiety. The greenhouse was the worst, the basement especially. I'd refuse to go down there, screaming until I was hoarse if anyone tried to make me. There were too many of them down there, too many faces watching from the shadows. My mom eventually stopped asking why. So this new house, with no basement and bright white walls, felt like a fresh start. For the first 3 weeks, nothing happened. Not a single unexplained noise or shadow in the corner of my eye. I started sleeping through the night again. My mom commented on how much happier I seemed. I remember thinking maybe I'd outgrown whatever weird phase I was going through. It was mid-July, about a month after we'd moved in. The summer heat was brutal, but we were still enjoying the novelty of having a bigger yard. My brothers Tyler and Matt were playing some made-up ball game with my stepsister Jenna. I was sitting under this huge oak tree at the edge of our property, making daisy chains and keeping score for them. That's when I heard it, a man's voice saying something that sounded like, "She's watching us." It was so clear, like someone was standing right next to me. I looked up toward the sound, and my stomach instantly knotted. At the edge of our property, where our yard met the beginning of a small wooded area, there was a group of men, maybe 7 or 8 of them, but they weren't solid. I could see the trees through them. Some were dressed like the Native Americans I'd seen in my history textbooks. Buckskin clothes, long hair with feathers. Others wore what looked like old-timey settler clothes, suspenders, rough-looking shirts, wide-brimmed hats. They were just standing there, talking among themselves, like this was the most normal thing in the world. I froze, the half-finished daisy chain slipping from my fingers. I'd seen spirits before, but never a group like this, never so clearly in broad daylight, and never ones that noticed me back. One of them, a tall, skeletal-looking man with a patchy beard and dirty settler clothes, suddenly stopped mid-conversation and turned directly toward me. His eyes widened and his face twisted into this horrible expression of rage and fear. "She can see us!" he screamed, pointing a bony finger in my direction. "Witch! She's a witch!" I scrambled backward, pressing my back against the tree trunk. The man started moving toward me, his movements jerky but determined. The others in the group turned to look at me too, some curious, others hostile. "You shouldn't be able to see us, girl," the man hissed as he got closer. "No living eyes should see the dead. What devil's magic do you possess?" I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My brothers and Jenna kept playing, completely oblivious to what was happening 20 feet away from them. The ghost man was now standing right in front of me, leaning down so his translucent face was level with mine. I could see every detail of his sunken cheeks, the rotting teeth, the empty hatred in his eyes. That's when I broke. Tears started streaming down my face and I curled into a ball covering my ears, even though it did nothing to block his voice. "Please leave me alone," I whispered. "Please, I don't want to see you." Lily, what's wrong?" My mom's voice cut through everything. She must have come outside to check on us and seen me crying. I looked up. My mom was rushing across the lawn toward me, her face creased with worry. The ghost man was still there, hovering right beside her, but she walked right through him without noticing. The others had moved closer too, forming a loose semicircle around us. "Headache," I managed to say. It was our code word. Whenever I saw things, I'd say I had a headache, and Mom would know something was happening without me having to explain in front of other people. "Oh, honey. Come inside, let's get you some medicine and lie down in the dark," she said, helping me up. As we walked back to the house, I could feel them following us, all of them, not just the angry settler, but the whole group, trailing behind like some macabre parade. I kept my eyes forward, gripping my mom's hand so tight my knuckles turned white. Inside, Mom took me to my room, gave me some children's Tylenol, and pulled the curtains closed. She put a cool washcloth on my forehead and told me to rest. "I'll check on you in a bit. Try to sleep it off," she said, closing the door softly behind her. I wasn't alone. They had followed me inside. They stood around my room, some by the window, one sitting at my desk chair, the angry settler man pacing at the foot of my bed. I pulled the covers over my head and silently cried myself to sleep. When I woke up, it was dark outside. For a blissful moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. Then I lowered the blanket and saw a Native American man sitting cross-legged in the corner of my room, watching me with sad eyes. Different from the ones I'd seen earlier, but clearly one of them. "You need to tell us why you can see us," he said quietly. His voice was gentler than the settlers had been, but the question made my skin crawl just the same. I pretended I couldn't hear him, rolling over to face the wall. But ignoring them didn't work. For the next 3 days, different spirits from that group would appear in my room, in the hallway, in the bathroom, while I was brushing my teeth. Some would just watch me. Others would try to talk to me, asking questions or demanding answers. The settler man was the worst. He'd scream about witchcraft and damnation whenever he appeared. I was falling apart. I couldn't sleep. I barely ate. My mom was talking about taking me to a doctor. My brothers thought I was faking to get attention. Jenna just avoided me completely. Then came my birthday, July 17th. Despite everything, my mom had planned a small party. We had cake after dinner, and I opened a few presents. I managed to fake enough enthusiasm to convince everyone I was feeling better. By 8 o'clock, I was back in my room, sitting on my bed and staring at the wall, waiting for the next ghost to show up and torment me. When she appeared, it wasn't what I expected. She was a Native American woman, probably in her 30s, with long black hair and wearing a simple buckskin dress adorned with small beadwork patterns. Unlike the others, she didn't just barge in or start demanding things. She stood at the doorway of my room and waited until I noticed her. "May I come in?" she asked. Her voice was calm, almost musical. I was so surprised by the courtesy that I nodded without thinking. She walked in, or floated really, and sat at the edge of my bed. Not too close, like she knew I needed space. For a ghost, she seemed incredibly aware of boundaries. "My name is Naya," she said. "I've come to talk to you about what's happening." I hugged my knees to my chest. "Are you going to call me a witch too?" She smiled sadly. "No, child, you're not a witch. You're what my people would call a spirit seer, someone whose eyes can glimpse beyond the veil." "I don't want to see beyond any veil," I said, my voice cracking. "I just want to be normal." "I know," she said, "and I'm sorry for how the others have treated you. They are afraid of what they don't understand." She explained that some living people could see the dead. It wasn't common, but it happened. Some spirit seers used their ability to help lost souls find peace. Others exploited it for entertainment or profit. And some, like me, just wanted to ignore it and live a normal life. The settlers and some of my own people who you saw, they died during a conflict many summers ago on this very land, she told me. They have been wandering here ever since, unable to move on, stuck in their anger and confusion. They don't understand why some living person can suddenly see them when they've been invisible for so long. I thought about the greenhouse, about all the spirits I'd seen there. But why are they only bothering me now? I've seen ghosts before. Different places hold different spirits, she explained. And not all spirits notice the living who can see them. These ones did, and they're curious, scared, angry, many emotions. "I just want them to leave me alone," I whispered. Naya nodded. "I will help with that. I cannot make them leave this place. It is where they are bound, but I can keep them from bothering you." "Why would you help me?" I asked. "Because no child should live in fear," she said simply. "And because I was once like you, many years ago, I know how frightening it can be." She promised to speak to the others, to make them understand they needed to leave me in peace. She couldn't promise I'd never see them again. They would still be here, and with my ability, I might glimpse them from time to time, but they wouldn't approach me or try to communicate unless I initiated it. True to her word, things changed after that night. The hostile visits stopped. The angry settler no longer appeared at the foot of my bed screaming about witchcraft. Sometimes I'd still catch glimpses of them at the edge of our property or through a window, but they kept their distance. Occasionally, I'd accidentally walk through one of them in the hallway or the kitchen, that cold, electric feeling that makes your whole body shudder. A few times I woke up to find spirits sitting at the foot of my bed, quietly talking among themselves, not realizing I was awake. But they'd quickly leave when they noticed me. Naya visited me a few more times over the next year. She never stayed long, but she'd check in, make sure the others were keeping their promise. She taught me a few things about my gift, as she called it, though I still wasn't sure if that's what it was. We stayed in that house until I was 15, when my stepdad got a job in Washington and we had to move again. On my last night there, Naya came to say goodbye. She told me I would always see spirits. It wasn't something I could outgrow or turn off, but I could learn to live with it, to set boundaries, to not let fear control me. I'm 26 now, and she was right. I still see them sometimes, not as often as when I was a kid, but they're still there at the edges of my perception. I've made my peace with it mostly, but I still think about that summer, about the group of ghosts at the edge of our property, about the terrifying days that followed, and about Naya. I never told my family the full truth about what happened in that house behind the Dairy Queen. How could I? But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Naya hadn't intervened. Would I have spent my entire time in that house terrorized by angry spirits? Would I have convinced myself I was going crazy? Would I have ended up being one of those kids who gets put on all sorts of medications because no one believes what they're really seeing? I guess I'll never know. But I do know that somewhere in Vail, Oregon, in a plain white house behind a Dairy Queen, there's a group of spirits still wandering the property. And sometimes when a new family moves in, they might notice a child who seems to be looking at things that aren't there. And maybe, just maybe, Naya is still watching out for those children too. Story 16. Ivy never really talked about this with anyone except my therapist, and even he looked at me like I was making it up. But I swear on everything I care about that what I'm about to share actually happened. Twice. And I still don't have any explanation for it. This all started back when I was 16, in my sophomore year at Westmore High. I lived in the historic district, you know, those neighborhoods with the old Victorian houses and brick sidewalks that the city keeps preserved like some kind of museum. My parents' house was about a 20-minute walk from school, and I usually left early enough to get there with plenty of time to hang out with friends before first period. But this particular Tuesday in October, I'd overslept. My alarm didn't go off, or maybe I hit snooze too many times. I honestly don't remember. What I do remember is jerking awake, looking at my phone, and realizing I had exactly 17 minutes to get to class before I'd be marked late again. One more tardy and I'd get detention, which meant missing baseball practice. I threw on whatever clothes were closest. Jeans from the floor, a hoodie hanging on my desk chair, grabbed my backpack and sprinted downstairs. Mom had already left for work, but she'd left a granola bar on the counter with a note reminding me about a dentist appointment later that week. I stuffed the bar in my pocket and bolted out the door. The fastest route to school took me down Elmwood Drive, then through Hanover Street, and finally along this narrow road called Mason Lane that ended at Westmore Park. The park had this old stone wall around it, one of those historical structures the city wouldn't tear down. The wall formed a T-junction at the end of Mason Lane, forcing you to either turn left or right to reach the park entrances. I was practically jogging, checking my phone every few seconds like that would somehow slow down time. I had maybe 8 minutes left to make it to class. The weather was cold but clear, one of those crisp fall mornings where your breath fogs in front of you. As I turned onto Mason Lane, I noticed someone walking about 30 feet ahead of me, just a guy with short dark hair wearing jeans and a gray jacket. He had this really distinctive backpack, one of those tactical-looking ones with lots of straps and pouches, dark green with some kind of patch on it. Nothing weird about seeing someone else walking this route. Plenty of people cut through the park to get to the community college on the other side. I remember slowing down a bit, not wanting to awkwardly pass him on the narrow sidewalk when we were both heading to the same place. As we approached the wall at the end of the lane, I expected him to turn either left or right. That's what everyone does because, well, there's a wall there. But he didn't turn. He just kept walking straight ahead, right toward the wall. At first, I thought maybe he was going to climb over it. The wall was tall on our side, probably 7 feet or so, but I knew it was much shorter on the park side, only about waist high because of how the land sloped down. So climbing over wasn't impossible, just weird and unnecessary when there were proper entrances 40 yards in either direction. But he didn't climb either. He just walked right up to the wall, and then this is where it gets hard to explain. He seemed to keep walking in place, like his legs were still moving, but he wasn't going anywhere. For a split second, it looked like he was floating slightly, his feet maybe 6 inches off the ground, and then he was just gone, vanished, like he'd walked through the wall into nothingness. I froze, my brain trying to process what I'd just seen. I blinked hard, thinking maybe I was still half asleep and imagining things, but I wasn't. I ran up to the wall, putting my hands on the rough stone surface. It was completely solid. I looked left and right, thinking maybe he'd made a quick turn and I'd somehow missed it, but there was nobody there. The wall was too high for me to see over completely. I was only 5'7" back then, but I jumped up and managed to get a glimpse of the park on the other side. Nothing, no sign of the guy. The park was mostly open space with a few trees and benches. Nowhere someone could disappear to that quickly. I was thoroughly freaked out, but also running late, so I did what any 16-year-old would do. I pushed it out of my mind, convinced myself I'd seen something normal, but just hadn't understood it correctly, and hurried to school. I made it with literally 30 seconds to spare before the bell. Throughout the day, I kept replaying what I'd seen, trying to rationalize it. Maybe he jumped the wall really fast. Maybe he crouched down on the other side. But deep down, I knew what I saw wasn't normal. It was like he'd walked into another dimension or something. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? I eventually convinced myself I must have been tired and seeing things. Life went on, and over time, the memory faded to the back of my mind, not forgotten, but filed away under weird stuff that probably has a normal explanation. Fast forward 4 years. I was 20, home from college for summer break, working at the local hardware store to make some extra cash. I still lived with my parents to save money, and I still walked through the same neighborhood to get to work. One Wednesday morning in June, I was heading to my early shift, taking the same route out of habit. It was around 7 in the morning, the air already warm and humid, promising one of those sticky summer days. I had my headphones in, half listening to a podcast while mentally preparing for 8 hours of stocking shelves and helping clueless homeowners find the right screws. As I turned onto Mason Lane, something caught my eye. A man was walking about 40 feet ahead of me. Something about him immediately sent a chill through me. He was wearing different clothes, khaki shorts and a blue t-shirt this time, but he had the same short, dark hair, and most distinctively the same green tactical backpack with the patch. My heart started racing. It couldn't be the same guy, could it? After 4 years, and yet something about his walk, his build, the way he carried himself, I knew it was him. I pulled my headphones out and slowed down, watching him carefully as we approached the wall. I held my breath as we got closer to the end of the lane. Would he turn this time? Was I just remembering the previous incident wrong? Had I built it up in my mind to be something supernatural when there was a perfectly normal explanation? He didn't turn. Just like before, he walked straight toward the wall, and just like before, as he reached it, his legs seemed to keep moving while his body stayed in place, hovering slightly above the ground, and then, in an instant, he was gone. This time, I wasn't going to let it go. I sprinted to the wall, dropping my backpack on the ground. I was taller now, about 6 feet, but the wall was still too high to see over completely. I jumped up, grabbing the edge of the wall with my hands, and pulled myself up enough to look over. Nothing. The park was empty except for an old woman walking her dog near the fountain about 100 yards away. The guy in the blue shirt with the green backpack was nowhere to be seen, and this was important. The park was mostly open space. There were some trees and benches, but nowhere a person could hide that quickly. If he'd jumped over and run, I would have seen him. I dropped back down, heart pounding, and ran to the nearest park entrance, about 40 yards to the right. I sprinted through the gate and looked around frantically. The park wasn't that big, and a guy in a blue shirt with a distinctive backpack should have been easy to spot. But he wasn't there. He had completely vanished. I spent nearly an hour searching that park, checking behind every tree, looking in the public restrooms, even asking the old dog walker if she'd seen anyone matching his description. Nothing. I was late for work, but I didn't care. What I had witnessed defied explanation. The second encounter removed any doubt from my mind. This wasn't a trick of the light or my imagination. This was something else, something that shouldn't be possible in the reality I thought I understood. In the weeks that followed, I became obsessed. I researched the history of Westmore Park, looking for any stories of strange occurrences or unexplained phenomena. I found nothing unusual, just the typical local history about when it was established and renovated over the years. I started taking detours to walk past that wall almost daily, hoping to see the man again, hoping to somehow solve this mystery. I brought a step stool once so I could see over the wall more easily. I even considered setting up a camera, but that felt too extreme, too crazy. After a few months of nothing, my visits became less frequent. Life got busy. I went back to college for my junior year, but I never stopped thinking about it. What did I see? A glitch in reality, a person caught in some kind of time loop, a glimpse into a parallel dimension where the park's layout is different from my own. I've considered every possibility, from the rational to the absurd. Sometimes I wonder if the wall itself is some kind of portal. Maybe in another dimension there's no wall there at all, and the man was simply walking a route that made perfect sense in his reality. Or maybe he's trapped, doomed to repeat the same journey over and over, unaware that he's passing through different versions of the world. I've gone back to that spot many times since then, but I've never seen him again. Part of me hopes I will so I can confirm I'm not crazy. Another part of me hopes I won't, because what would I even do if I saw him a third time? Try to call out to him, follow him through whatever portal or tear in reality he passes through? The thought terrifies me. It's been 7 years since the second sighting and I still don't have answers. I've moved away from Westmore now, but whenever I visit my parents, I find myself drawn to that wall, staring at it, waiting. Sometimes I press my hands against the rough stone surface, half expecting them to pass through into somewhere else. I know how this sounds. If someone told me this story, I'd think they were making it up or had seen something normal and misinterpreted it. But I know what I saw, twice, and it wasn't normal. So that's my story. I've never shared it publicly before because, well, who would believe me? But I can't be the only one who's experienced something like this. Something that makes you question everything you thought you knew about how reality works. I just wish I knew what it meant. I wish I had some kind of closure. But all I have are questions that keep me up at night, and a nagging feeling that there's more to our world than we understand. Has anyone else experienced anything similar? Am I completely alone in this? Story 17. I don't talk about this much. Even typing it out now makes my hands shake a little. Most people don't believe in this stuff anyway, and I get it. I wouldn't either if I hadn't lived through it. But I need to get this off my chest, and maybe someone here will understand or have experienced something similar. I was 6 when we moved to Riverford. It's one of those small towns where everyone knows everyone and the houses are all at least 50 years old. Ours was this massive Victorian that my mom fell in love with instantly. 3 stories, peeling blue paint, those weird little turret things on the corners. I hated it the moment I saw it. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, at the end of this long hallway that always felt colder than the rest of the house. I remember lying in bed that first night, staring at the ceiling and feeling like something was watching me from the corner. I started this ritual where I'd repeat, "There's no such thing as monsters," over and over until I fell asleep. It was the only way I could close my eyes. 2 years after we moved in, my little brother Thomas was born. Mom and Dad converted the office downstairs into a nursery, but when he was around 3, they decided he should have a big boy room and gave him my old bedroom. I was actually relieved to move into the bigger room across the hall. Maybe this sounds stupid, but I felt like I was abandoning him to whatever had been in that corner. It started about a week after he moved in. I woke up to screaming, not like normal toddler crying, but genuine terror. I ran across the hall and found my mom already in there holding Thomas while he sobbed hysterically. The man in the corner, he's trying to light it on fire," Thomas kept saying over and over. Mom tried to calm him down, showing him there was nobody there, but he wouldn't stop shaking. The only thing that worked was putting on that kid's show he loved, Fireman Sam. Something about watching firefighters put out flames would calm him enough to eventually fall back asleep. This happened almost every night for months. My parents tried everything: nightlights, leaving the door open, checking under the bed together before sleep. Nothing worked. Thomas would wake up between 2 and 3 in the morning, always with the same story. A man in the corner trying to start a fire and bugs crawling all over the floor. Mom eventually started letting him sleep in her room when he got too scared, but even there, he'd sometimes bolt upright in bed and point to the corner of her room, whispering, "He followed me." I remember one morning finding my mom burning these weird herbs in Thomas's room. When I asked what she was doing, she just said she was clearing the energy. I didn't understand then, but I could tell by the dark circles under her eyes that she was starting to believe something wasn't right with our house. When I was about 13, things got worse. Mom came into my room one morning looking like she hadn't slept at all. Her hands were shaking as she sat on the edge of my bed. "Ellie, something happened last night," she said quietly, like she was afraid someone might overhear. I woke up because I felt someone breathing in my ear. I thought it was Thomas, but then I remembered he's at his dad's this weekend. My stomach dropped. "What did you do?" I turned on the light. No one was there, but I could still feel it, like someone was standing right next to the bed watching me. That day, she bought sage from some New Age shop in the next town over and burned it in every room of the house. She was especially thorough in her bedroom, waving the smoking bundle into every corner while whispering something I couldn't hear. The next morning, I stayed home sick from school with a fever. Mom had to go to work, so I was alone in the house. I remember lying in bed playing Pokemon on my DS, feeling that weird floaty feeling you get when you're sick. Suddenly the air around my head felt different, like it was thicker somehow, or pressurized. It's hard to explain, but it was like being underwater, except I could still breathe normally. Then I heard it, deep, heavy breathing right in my right ear. I froze. The breathing continued, slow and deliberate. I could even feel the warmth of it against my skin. I wanted to scream, but I was paralyzed with fear. After what felt like forever but was probably only seconds, I managed to jump out of bed and run downstairs. I spent the rest of the day on the couch in the living room with all the lights on, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. I told myself it was just the fever making me imagine things. That's what my dad would say anyway. He never believed any of the ghost nonsense, as he called it. But the next day, it happened again. I was feeling better, but Mom let me stay home one more day just to be sure. I was sitting at my desk doing homework when that bubble feeling returned. This time, I knew what was coming. The breathing started in my right ear again, but this time, I swear I felt a hand brush against my hair. I bolted out of my room so fast I knocked my chair over. I ran straight to Mom's room and locked myself in until she came home from work. I didn't tell her what happened. I didn't want to scare her more than she already was, but that night I dragged my mattress into Thomas's room and slept on his floor. He seemed relieved to have me there. About a week later, my grandmother came to visit. She brought me this special heat-resistant mug she'd found at a craft fair. It was beautiful, hand-painted with these intricate flowers. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and I remember exactly what happened next. Grandma asked how I was liking my new room, even though I'd been in it for years at that point. Without thinking, I said, "It's fine. I think the ghosts are gone now." The second those words left my mouth, the mug, which was just sitting there on the table, nobody touching it, exploded. Not like it fell and broke, but literally shattered into dozens of tiny pieces, like something had crushed it from the inside. We all just sat there in shock, staring at the ceramic shards scattered across the table. Grandma left early the next morning. She didn't say why, but I saw her making the sign of the cross before she got in her car. The breathing incident stopped after that, but other weird things kept happening. Doors would close by themselves. We'd find Thomas's toys arranged in perfect circles in the middle of his room. The smell of smoke would suddenly fill a room, then disappear just as quickly. It wasn't until years later, when I was packing to leave for college, that Mom finally told me the truth about the house. When she was a teenager, before we moved in, the house had been abandoned and boarded up. She and her friends had broken in one night on a dare and brought a Ouija board with them. "We were just messing around," she said, folding one of my shirts with too much concentration. "But something happened. The planchette started moving so fast we couldn't keep up. The candles we'd brought all went out at once, and then we heard this laughter coming from upstairs. They ran out and never went back." A few years later, she drove by and saw the house was for sale. She couldn't believe it when Dad fell in love with it. She tried to talk him out of buying it, but couldn't explain why without sounding crazy. "I thought maybe enough time had passed," she said quietly. "I thought whatever was there would be gone. We moved out the summer I left for college. Mom claimed it was because the house was too big for just her and Thomas now, but I knew the real reason. Thomas still has nightmares about the man in the corner. I still can't sleep without checking every corner of my bedroom first. I've researched the history of that house since then. There was a fire in the 1930s that killed a family of 4. The father was suspected of starting it. I don't know if that explains what we experienced, but sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, feeling that bubble sensation around my head, hearing that breathing in my ear. I don't know what was in that house. I don't know if we brought something with us when we left. All I know is that I'm never using a Ouija board, and I'm never going back to Riverford. Story 18. I've never told this story to anyone outside my family. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened last year in my sister Emma's apartment. I don't believe in ghosts or supernatural stuff normally, but what we experienced that weekend, I just can't explain it. Emma had moved into this weird apartment about 6 months before everything went down. The building has this strange layout. The first floor is our family's bookstore, which I help run. The second floor is split between our mom's art studio and Emma's apartment. The building is pretty old, probably from the 1930s, with those creaky wooden floors and strange little nooks everywhere. Emma was the only person actually living in the building. Mom only used her studio during the day, and the bookstore closed at 6 every evening. My sister had been complaining for weeks about hearing footsteps and movement downstairs at night. I kept telling her it was just the building settling, or maybe mice, but she swore it sounded like someone walking around. She also mentioned this broken cuckoo clock in her living room that would somehow chime around 3 in the morning, which was extra creepy because the thing didn't even have batteries in it. I didn't take her seriously until I stayed over last October. It was a Friday, and I'd closed up the bookstore and decided to crash at her place since we were planning to visit our grandparents the next morning. Everything was normal at first. We ordered pizza, watched some stupid Netflix show, and were just hanging out like we always do. Around 11 that night, we started noticing this smell in the kitchen. It was faint at first, like something was rotting somewhere. We checked the fridge, the trash, under the sink, nothing. Within an hour, the smell had gotten so bad we could barely stand to be in there. It was this horrible putrid stench that reminded me of the time a mouse died inside our family's cabin wall, that sickly sweet rotting smell that makes your stomach turn. I swear to God, Rachel, I cleaned everything yesterday, Emma kept saying. She was really upset because she's super tidy, almost obsessively so. The smell made no sense. Her apartment was spotless. We started opening cabinets, moving appliances, checking the vents, nothing. The smell seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The weird thing was, it didn't seem to spread beyond the kitchen. You could stand in the doorway, and it was like hitting a wall of stink. "What about that closet?" I asked, pointing to this narrow door in the corner of the kitchen. It was this weird, unfinished space that didn't really match the rest of the apartment. Emma shrugged. "It's just storage, some construction materials from when they renovated, and I keep my recycling in there." We opened it anyway. The closet was narrow and deep, extending back farther than you'd expect. There were some paint cans, pieces of drywall, and Emma's neatly sorted recycling bins. The smell was definitely stronger in here, but we still couldn't find the source. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight to see better into the back corners. That's when I noticed something on the far wall. It looked like a small piece of paper tacked to the unfinished drywall. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. Emma squinted. "I have no idea. I've never seen that before." The closet narrowed toward the back, and since I'm smaller than Emma, I squeezed past the junk to reach whatever was on the wall. The smell was overwhelming now, making my eyes water. When I got to the back, I saw it was a small yellowed piece of paper, about the size of a post-it note, pinned to the wall with what looked like an ancient thumbtack. My hands were shaking a bit as I carefully removed it. The paper was old and brittle, yellowed with age, and on it, drawn in purple crayon, was a simple smiley face, just a circle with 2 dots for eyes and a curved line for a mouth, the kind a little kid would draw. But there was something off about it. The purple crayon lines seemed too deliberate, too precise for a child's drawing. I brought it back to show Emma, holding it carefully by the edges. "What the hell is that?" she asked, not touching it. "I don't know. A smiley face? Let's call him Happy Smiley," I said, trying to lighten the mood, even though I felt deeply unsettled. "I've never seen that before," Emma repeated, her voice shaking slightly. "Rachel, I've lived here for 6 months. I've been in that closet dozens of times to take out recycling. That was not there before." That's when it hit me how weird this really was. No one else had access to Emma's apartment. She was religious about keeping her door locked, and she definitely would have noticed this creepy little paper if it had been there all along. Maybe it was just stuck behind something and fell down, I suggested, not believing it myself. No way, I would have seen it. Someone put that there, she insisted. The strangest part, as soon as I removed the paper from the wall, the smell disappeared. Not gradually, it was just gone, like someone had flipped a switch. One moment, the kitchen reeked of death, and the next it smelled completely normal. We both noticed it at the same time and looked at each other. Did the smell just stop? Emma asked. I nodded, looking down at the yellowed paper in my hand. What the hell is going on? We stayed up half the night debating what to do with Happy Smiley. Emma wanted to put it back, afraid that removing it might have angered whatever left it there. I thought that was the worst possible idea. In the end, we decided to take it with us to our grandparents' house the next day. Our grandmother was this super religious old-school woman who knew about spiritual stuff, as she called it. That night, we both slept in Emma's living room with all the lights on. Neither of us wanted to admit how scared we were. Around 3 a.m, just like Emma had described, the broken cuckoo clock on her wall made a sound. Not the full cuckooing noise, but a strained mechanical grinding, like it was trying to work but couldn't quite manage it. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Emma just looked at me with this "I told you so" expression. We barely slept, and as soon as the sun came up, we packed our overnight bags and got the hell out of there. I carefully placed Happy Smiley in a Ziploc bag, not wanting to touch it more than necessary. Our grandparents lived about an hour away in this old farmhouse they'd owned forever. When we arrived, we tried to act normal through lunch, but eventually Emma blurted out the whole story. Our grandfather looked skeptical, but our grandmother's face went dead serious when we showed her the paper. She took one look at Happy Smiley and immediately walked to the wood stove in their kitchen. Before we could stop her, she had thrown the paper into the flames. It caught fire instantly, burning with this weird purplish flame for a second before turning to ash. "Grandma," Emma cried, "what did you do that for?" "Some things are better not to question," she said firmly. "Some things you find aren't meant to be kept. This is one of them." Emma and I were freaked out. What if destroying Happy Smiley made whatever put it there angry? What if the entity came back worse than before? Our grandmother assured us that burning it was the right thing to do, that fire purifies and releases. She said a prayer in Polish, her native language, and refused to discuss it further. The rest of our visit was tense. Emma was terrified to go back to her apartment, convinced that whatever had left Happy Smiley would be angry that we'd removed and destroyed it. I tried to be rational, but honestly, I was scared too. When we returned to Emma's apartment Sunday evening, we half expected to find the place destroyed or filled with that awful smell again, but everything was exactly as we'd left it. No smell, no strange noises, nothing out of place. Even the broken cuckoo clock stayed silent that night. But here's the thing, the weird occurrences didn't stop completely. They just changed. I work in the bookstore downstairs, and now I constantly feel like I'm being watched when I'm alone there. I'll be shelving books, and the hairs on my neck will stand up like someone's standing right behind me. But when I turn around, there's nobody there. Emma still hears strange noises, but now they come from Mom's studio instead of the bookstore. Sometimes she'll hear what sounds like glass shattering from the studio at night, but when she checks, nothing is broken or disturbed. Mom says she never notices anything unusual during the day. The most unsettling part is that neither of us can explain how that paper got into the closet. Emma swears it wasn't there before, and I believe her. No one else had access to her apartment. The building was always locked after business hours, and that smell, appearing and disappearing like that, makes no scientific sense. It's been almost a year now, and we still talk about Happy Smiley sometimes. What was it? Who put it there? Why did it smell so awful? And why did the smell vanish the moment we removed it from the wall? I don't believe in ghosts, but I can't explain what happened that night. Whatever entity was in that building, it marked its territory with a child's drawing of a smiley face, and for some reason, removing that mark eliminated the supernatural stench that had filled the kitchen. Emma still lives in the apartment, though she's talking about moving when her lease is up in a few months. I still work in the bookstore, but I never stay alone there after dark anymore. Sometimes when I'm in the storeroom, I'll catch a whiff of that same putrid smell just for a second before it disappears. Part of me wishes we hadn't burned Happy Smiley. Maybe we could have learned more about what it was or where it came from. But another part of me is relieved it's gone. Some things are better left unknown, I guess. But I still check behind me when I'm alone in the bookstore. And Emma still sleeps with her lights on, and neither of us goes near that closet in her kitchen if we can help it, because whatever left that smiley face is still there, somewhere in that building. We can feel it, watching, waiting. For what? I don't know. And sometimes, when I'm locking up the bookstore late at night, I swear I can hear the faint sound of a child giggling somewhere in the darkness, but by the time I turn around, it's always gone. Story 19. I've never really talked about this outside my family. It sounds crazy, no matter how I tell it, but I swear every word is true. It happened back in the 80s when I was 17, and then again when I was 23. Both times on the same stretch of road on my tribe's reservation in Arizona. The first time was summer of '86. My cousin Layla and I were heading back from a concert in the city. It was late, maybe around 11 at night, and we were taking this old dirt road that cuts through about 20 miles of nothing before reaching the main part of the reservation. We called it the back way. Most people avoided it at night because it had no lights and was full of potholes, but we were teenagers and thought we knew better. I was driving my dad's old Chevy Nova, blue, rusted around the wheel wells, but reliable enough. We were about halfway home when the engine just died. No sputter, no warning. 1 second we're cruising along with the radio playing, and the next, total silence. "What the hell, Maya?" Layla said, turning down the radio that wasn't even playing anymore. I tried the ignition a few times, but nothing happened, not even a click. The whole car was dead, like the battery had been yanked out. We sat there for a few minutes trying to figure out what to do. No cell phones back then, obviously. Just 2 teenage girls on a pitch-black dirt road with nothing but moonlight. We decided to walk back to the reservation. It was only about 10 miles, and we figured someone would probably drive by eventually and give us a ride. I grabbed my purse, Layla took her backpack, and we locked the car up. The night was weirdly quiet. No crickets, no wind, just the sound of our shoes on the dirt. We walked for what felt like forever, maybe 30 minutes, when Layla nudged me and pointed ahead. "Look, headlights, someone's coming." I squinted, and sure enough, there was the outline of a car up ahead, but something felt off right away. The headlights weren't moving. As we got closer, I could make out the shape better. That can't be right," I mumbled. It was my dad's Nova. The same car we'd just left behind us. Same color, same rust spots, same bumper sticker from my dad's construction job. At first I thought someone was messing with us. Maybe some guys from the reservation had found our car and driven it up ahead as a prank. But when we got close enough to look inside, all our stuff was exactly where we'd left it. My cassette tapes in the center console, Layla's jacket on the back seat. Even the keys were still in my purse, which I was carrying. We stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. "This is impossible," Layla whispered. I tried the door, half expecting it to be locked, but it opened right up. Everything was exactly as we'd left it. I even found the receipt from the gas station we'd stopped at earlier that night, still crumpled in the cup holder. "Let's just get in and try starting it again," Layla suggested. I put the key in the ignition, but just like before, nothing happened. Dead as a doorknob. We were both seriously freaked out by now, but we figured the only thing to do was keep walking. So we locked up the car again and continued down the road. After walking for maybe 15 more minutes, we both stopped dead in our tracks. There, about 50 yards ahead of us, was the Nova again. "This isn't funny anymore," Layla said, her voice shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This time, before we kept walking, Layla picked up a stick from the side of the road. "I'm going to put this on the hood," she said, "so we know for sure." She placed the stick right in the center of the hood, and we kept walking, constantly looking back to make sure the car wasn't somehow following us. But the road behind us was empty. 20 minutes later, we saw headlights again. Same position, same car. When we got to it, we both immediately checked the hood. The stick was gone. We checked inside the car, and again, everything was exactly as we'd left it. Our stuff in the same places. The keys still in my purse. By this point, I was struggling not to completely lose it. It felt like we were trapped in some kind of loop, doomed to walk this road forever and keep finding the same car. I remember Layla sitting down in the dirt and starting to cry, which was so unlike her. She was always the tough one. "What if we can't get out?" she sobbed. "What if we're stuck here forever?" I sat down next to her, and we just stayed there for a while, not knowing what to do. The whole time there was this pressure in the air, like right before a thunderstorm, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky, just stars and moonlight and this overwhelming feeling of wrongness. Eventually we decided to keep walking. What else could we do? But this time we tried something different. Instead of following the road, we walked through the scrub alongside it. It was harder going, lots of rocks and cacti, but we were desperate. We walked like that for about an hour, scratched up and exhausted. Then the weirdest thing happened. The pressure in the air suddenly lifted, like someone had opened a window in a stuffy room. We both felt it at the same time. "Do you feel that?" Layla asked. I nodded, and without saying anything else, we climbed back onto the road. We walked for another half hour or so, and then we saw lights ahead, real lights this time, from the reservation. When we finally reached the first houses, we both broke down in tears of relief. The next day, my uncle drove us back out to find the car. It was exactly where we'd originally left it, about 10 miles from the reservation. The engine started on the first try. For years, I tried to convince myself it had all been some kind of shared hallucination. Maybe we'd been drugged somehow, or maybe there was something in the air that night that messed with our heads. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Then it happened again. Not the time loop, but something just as strange and in the exact same area. It was early summer, 1992. I was 23 and home from college for a few weeks. Some friends and I were driving back from a party in the city, taking that same back road. I was in the passenger seat this time, with my friend Tom driving and 2 others in the back. We were passing through that same stretch of road where Layla and I had experienced the loop. I hadn't told any of them about what happened. It wasn't something I talked about. But as we drove through, I felt that same pressure in the air, that same wrongness. "Slow down," I said to Tom. "What's up?" he asked, but he slowed anyway. "Just slow down a second." That's when I saw it. Off to the right, deep in the woods, there were these strange white lights, not flashlights or headlights. They were too steady, too bright. They were illuminating the trees from within the forest, maybe a quarter mile off the road. "You guys see that?" I asked, pointing. Everyone went quiet. Tom turned down the radio. "What the hell is that?" one of my friends whispered from the back seat. As we watched, the lights seemed to pulse slightly, and then we heard it. This low, humming sound, not like an engine or generator. It was deeper, almost subsonic. I could feel it in my chest more than hear it. Then, without warning, whatever was making the lights shot straight up into the air. It burst through the tree canopy and hovered maybe 100 feet above the forest. It was a craft of some kind, metallic, disc-shaped, with rotating lights around its perimeter that shifted from white to blue to red. Tom slammed on the brakes, and we all scrambled out of the car to get a better look. The thing just hovered there for maybe 10 seconds, completely silent now. Then the lights intensified, and it shot off toward the horizon faster than anything I've ever seen. 1 second it was there, the next it was just a tiny point of light, and then nothing. We stood there in the middle of the road, staring at the empty sky. Nobody said anything for what felt like forever. "Did we all just see a UFO?" Tom finally asked. Nobody answered him. We all knew what we'd seen. On the drive back, everyone was quiet. It wasn't until we reached the reservation that Tom asked me why I'd told him to slow down in the first place. "I just had a feeling," I said. I never told them about what happened with Layla. I never told anyone, actually, until now. But I've thought about it constantly over the years. Two impossible things happening in the exact same spot, years apart. I've researched a lot since then. I've read about skinwalkers in our tribal legends, about tears in reality, about government experiments. Nothing quite fits what we experienced. But I do know that stretch of road is different somehow, wrong somehow. A few years ago, I heard they finally paved that old dirt road. Part of me wonders if whatever was there is now buried under asphalt and concrete. But another part of me knows better. Whatever it was, whatever is there, isn't something you can just pave over and forget. I don't drive that road anymore. I take the long way around, even though it adds an hour to my trip. Sometimes when I'm back visiting family, I'll look in that direction and feel that same pressure in the air, even from miles away. Whatever happened on that road, the time loop, the UFO, I still can't explain it. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I know that somewhere out there, in that specific spot on our reservation, there's something that doesn't belong in our world, something that's still there, waiting for someone else to drive by at just the wrong time. Story 20. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened that night at Hot Lake Hotel. It's been 3 months, and I haven't slept right since. I've tried talking to a therapist, but honestly, how do you explain something like this without sounding completely insane? I took the night security job at Hot Lake Hotel back in October. The pay was decent, better than my previous gig at the mall, and the hours suited me since I've always been a night owl. I'd heard rumors about the place being haunted, but who hasn't heard ghost stories about old buildings in small towns? I figured it was just local folklore to attract tourists to Union County. My first few weeks were uneventful. The hotel had been renovated since its abandoned days, and it was running as a bed and breakfast. Nice place, honestly. All that beautiful brickwork and the hot springs nearby. But there was something off about it. The owners were friendly enough, but seemed tense whenever guests asked about the building's history. They'd give rehearsed answers about the thermal springs and Dr. Fye's famous hospital, but they'd change the subject if anyone mentioned ghosts or the asylum years. There were these signs everywhere asking guests to keep your voices low and be sweet. That gave me the creeps. The owners said they were vintage pieces from the building's past that added character, but they felt more like warnings than quaint decorations. My job was simple. Patrol the halls every hour, check the exits, and monitor the security cameras from the small office behind the front desk. The overnight shift ran from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. Most nights, the guests were asleep by midnight, and I'd spend my time reading or scrolling through my phone between rounds. The night it happened was a Tuesday in late October. We only had 3 rooms occupied. An elderly couple from Washington, a business traveler, and a woman who checked in that afternoon saying she needed a quiet place to finish writing a book. The weather had turned, with this thick fog rolling in from the valley that made the whole place feel isolated, cut off from the world. I started my shift at 11 and did my first patrol at midnight. Everything was normal. All guests in their rooms, building secure. I went back to the security office and pulled up the camera feeds on the monitor. That's when I first noticed something weird. The camera in the old ballroom, which was now used for events and wedding receptions, kept showing interference, like static flickering across the screen every few minutes. I radioed my manager, but he just told me it was probably the fog affecting the wireless signal, and to ignore it unless the camera went completely offline. So I did. Big mistake. Around 1:30 in the morning, I was scrolling through my phone when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a piano. Not recorded music, but someone actually playing. The notes were hesitant, like someone picking out a melody they half remembered. At first, I thought maybe one of the guests had trouble sleeping and decided to play the old upright in the common area. I stepped out of the office to check, but the common area was empty, the piano untouched. The music was coming from upstairs, the third floor. Here's the thing, there isn't a piano on the third floor. There used to be one in the days when it was a hospital, according to the old photos hanging in the lobby, but it was removed decades ago. I grabbed my flashlight and headed upstairs. The hotel was eerily quiet except for the faint piano notes. As I climbed the main staircase, I noticed the temperature dropping. By the time I reached the second floor landing, I could see my breath. In October, inside a heated building, the music stopped abruptly as I reached the third floor. The hallway was dark except for the dim emergency lights. I called out, "Hello, is someone up here?" No response. I walked down the hallway, checking rooms that were used for storage now. Nothing seemed disturbed. As I turned to head back to the stairs, I heard a creaking sound coming from the end of the hall, the distinct sound of a rocking chair in motion. There was an old sitting area at the end of the corridor with a couple of antique rocking chairs. As I approached, I saw one of them moving steadily back and forth. No one was sitting in it. No windows were open. No draft that could explain it. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I told myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe the floor was uneven, or maybe someone had just been sitting there and the chair hadn't settled yet. I reached out and grabbed the arm of the chair to stop it. The moment my fingers touched the wood, the temperature plummeted. I'm not exaggerating when I say it must have dropped 20 degrees in seconds. And then I heard a woman's voice, soft but clear, right beside my ear. "You shouldn't be here after dark." I spun around, but there was nobody there, just an empty hallway and the rocking chair, now completely still. I'm not ashamed to admit I practically ran back downstairs to the security office. I checked all the camera feeds. Nobody had entered or exited the building. All guest rooms showed their doors closed. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I decided to do another patrol of the first floor to clear my head. As I passed through the lobby, I noticed something on the wall I hadn't seen before. A dark, wet patch spreading across the vintage wallpaper. It looked like water damage, but it wasn't there during my midnight round. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't water. The liquid was too thick, too dark. It smelled metallic, like copper, like blood. I reached out to touch it, then thought better of it. I took out my phone to take a picture as proof for my manager. But when I looked at the screen, the camera app showed nothing unusual. Just normal wallpaper, no stain. I looked up from my phone, and the stain was still there, now dripping onto the hardwood floor. That's when the screaming started. It came from the eastern wing of the hotel, the part that used to house the operating theater in Dr. Fai's day. It was a woman's scream, high-pitched and desperate, the kind that freezes your blood. Then another joined it, and another, until it sounded like multiple people were screaming in agony. I knew I should check it out. That was literally my job, but I couldn't move. The screams didn't sound like they were coming from the living. They had this hollow quality, like they were echoing through time. After what felt like forever but was probably only 30 seconds, the screams stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse. I forced myself to move toward the eastern wing, my flashlight beam bouncing off the walls as my hand shook. The corridor leading to what used to be the operating theater was pitch black. The emergency lights either burnt out or never installed in this rarely used section. About halfway down the corridor, my flashlight flickered and went out. I shook it, hit it against my palm, but nothing. Dead. The darkness was absolute. I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face. I turned to go back, using the wall as a guide, when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, deliberate steps, like someone wearing boots. Then a man's voice, gruff and annoyed. "Who left these instruments out? They'll rust." A cold sweat broke out across my back. I froze, not daring to turn around. The footsteps came closer, and I felt something brush past me, the distinct sensation of a person walking by, their shoulder bumping mine, but I couldn't see anyone. I broke into a run, no longer caring about looking professional or rational. I just needed to get back to light, to the security office, to somewhere that made sense. As I burst into the lobby, the lights flickered, and for a split second, I saw the lobby as it might have looked decades ago. Hospital beds lining the walls, patients in old-fashioned gowns, nurses in white caps. Then the lights stabilized, and everything was back to normal. I locked myself in the security office and checked the cameras again. Nothing unusual on any of the feeds, except for the ballroom camera, which now showed a clear image of the empty room. Except it wasn't empty. There was a dark figure standing in the center of the room, looking directly at the camera. It looked like a man in old-fashioned clothes, maybe early 20th century, holding what appeared to be a gardening spade. I blinked, and the figure was gone. By now it was nearly 3 in the morning. I seriously considered calling the police or waking up my manager, but what would I say? That I heard piano music from a non-existent piano? That I saw a ghost gardener on the security camera? I decided to tough it out until morning. I wasn't going to do any more patrols. The guests would have to fend for themselves if they needed anything. Around 4, I heard a child laughing somewhere in the building. Not an adult's laugh, but the distinct giggle of a young boy, followed by the sound of running footsteps overhead. The security cameras showed nothing. Then the temperature in the office began to drop. My breath fogged in front of me, and the computer screen flickered. In the reflection of the monitor, I saw someone standing behind me, a small boy with terrible burns covering the right side of his face and body. His one good eye was fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I spun around in my chair, but there was nobody there. When I turned back to the monitor, all the camera feeds were showing the same thing. Empty hallways with doors slowly opening and closing by themselves, one after another, like some kind of sick domino effect. Then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The temperature returned to normal. The camera feeds stabilized. The hotel fell silent. I spent the rest of my shift huddled in that office, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. When 7 o'clock finally came, I practically ran out the door, nearly knocking over the morning receptionist as she arrived. I called my manager later that day and quit. I made up some excuse about family issues, but I think he knew. He didn't seem surprised, just tired, like he'd had this conversation before. The thing is, I drove past the hotel yesterday. I couldn't help myself. I needed to see it in daylight, to reassure myself it was just an ordinary building. As I slowed down, I glanced up at the third-floor windows. There was a face pressed against one of the panes, an elderly woman with hollow eyes, her mouth moving like she was muttering to herself. And in the window next to hers, the burned boy, staring down at me. I hit the gas and haven't been back since. I don't know if what I experienced was real or if I had some kind of breakdown that night, but I know one thing for certain. There's something wrong with that place, something that doesn't want to be forgotten, and I can't shake the feeling that whatever it is, it followed me home. Story 21. I've always considered myself a pretty rational person. I'm not the type to jump at shadows or believe every bump in the night is something sinister. But what's been happening in my house for the past few months has me questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. For context, I'm 27 and live alone in a small 2-bedroom house in Maplewood. It's not particularly old or creepy looking, just a regular suburban home with beige siding and white trim. I bought it last year after saving up for what felt like forever. I was so proud to finally have my own place, somewhere I could feel safe and secure. That feeling didn't last long. It started with small things I could easily dismiss. I'd put something down and later find it in a slightly different spot. The temperature in certain rooms would drop suddenly, even though my thermostat readings stayed consistent. I blamed it on forgetfulness, drafts, ordinary housequirks, anything that made logical sense. But then I started having these incredibly vivid dreams, not nightmares exactly, but intense dreams where I'd be fully aware I was dreaming yet unable to wake myself up. In these dreams, I'd often see a shadowy figure standing in the corner of my bedroom, just watching me. I always woke up exhausted, like I hadn't slept at all. The really weird stuff began happening when I was awake, usually when I was gaming. I'm a bit of a night owl and often stay up playing online games with friends. I'd be fully focused on my screen when I'd feel something, like a finger or a hand, nudge my elbow, throwing off my aim. Other times, I'd feel something move close to my face, like someone leaning in to look at my screen. I'd whip around, heart pounding, but there was never anything there. Just my empty living room, my half-eaten snacks, and the blue glow of my monitor reflecting off the walls. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me after hours of staring at a screen. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. I even wondered if the house had some kind of weird electromagnetic field that was affecting my brain. I looked into all these explanations, but none of them fully satisfied me. Then, about 8 months ago, something happened that I couldn't explain away. I was in bed, almost asleep, but not quite there yet, in that drowsy state where your thoughts start to become dreams. Suddenly, I was jolted fully awake by the sound of my bedroom door handle rattling violently. Not just a little jiggle, but an aggressive, urgent shaking like someone was desperately trying to get in. I froze, paralyzed with fear. I live alone. The doors and windows were locked. There shouldn't be anyone else in the house. The rattling continued for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 or 20 seconds. Then it stopped abruptly. The silence afterward was almost worse than the noise. I lay there for hours, unable to move, unable to even reach for my phone to call for help. When the sun finally rose, I cautiously got out of bed and examined the door handle. It was noticeably looser than it had been the day before, as if someone had been wrenching it back and forth with considerable force. That was the moment I started to believe there might be something in my house, something that wasn't human. Over the next few months, I installed security cameras, motion sensors, the works. Nothing ever showed up on the footage. No alarms were triggered. Yet the experiences continued. What's most disturbing is how the, whatever it is, seems to be learning. After that first violent attempt with the door handle, it changed tactics. Now, when it tries to open my door at night, it does it gently, slowly, as if trying not to wake me. But somehow, I always wake up moments before these attempts. It's like my body senses its presence and alerts me before anything happens. I've taken to locking my bedroom door every night before I go to sleep. I check it multiple times, yanking on the handle to make sure it's secure. This became my nightly ritual, a desperate attempt to keep whatever it is out of my room. But about 2 weeks ago, I messed up. I was exhausted after pulling a 12-hour shift at work, followed by dinner with some friends. By the time I got home, all I wanted was to collapse into bed. In my fatigue, I forgot to lock my door. I fell into a deep sleep almost immediately. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up with that familiar sense of dread. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I knew something was wrong even before I opened my eyes. My door was opening, slowly, silently. It was swinging inward. I could see the hallway light filtering through the widening gap, but there was nobody there, at least nobody I could see. Panic seized me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I made a split-second decision to pretend I was still asleep. Maybe if it thought I was unconscious, it would leave me alone. So I lay there, eyes barely cracked open, watching through my eyelashes as my door opened fully. Nothing came in, at least nothing visible, but I could feel it. The air in the room changed, became heavier somehow, colder. And then I heard it, or rather, I didn't hear it. There was a presence moving around my room, but it made no footsteps, no creaking floorboards, just a sense of movement, of something circulating the perimeter of my bedroom. I kept my breathing steady, fighting against the urge to hyperventilate. My heart was hammering so loudly in my chest that I was certain whatever it was could hear it. The presence completed its circuit of my room, and then, God, this is still so hard to talk about, it approached my bed. I was lying on my stomach, face turned to the side on the pillow, when I felt it crouch down beside me. It put its face, or what I assume was its face, right next to mine, so close that if I had opened my eyes fully, we would have been staring directly at each other. It was checking if I was awake. I could feel its breath, energy. Something was disturbing the air near my cheek in rhythmic pulses. It wasn't warm like human breath. It was cool, almost mentholated, making my skin tingle unpleasantly. I've never been so terrified in my life. Every instinct was screaming at me to run, to fight, to do something, but I remained perfectly still, knowing with absolute certainty that revealing I was awake would make things much, much worse. After what seemed like an eternity, the presence moved away from my face. I felt it retreat slightly, still near my bed, but no longer right next to me. Taking advantage of this slight distance, I murmured something unintelligible and turned onto my side, as if shifting in my sleep. I pulled the covers up higher, creating a barrier between me and it, thin and symbolic as it was. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, silently praying for morning to come quickly. I must have eventually fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion and adrenaline crash, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through my blinds. And here's the strangest part. My door was closed, completely closed, as if it had never been opened. I checked the lock, and it turned smoothly. No sign of the previous damage. For a brief, blissful moment, I wondered if the whole experience had been a particularly vivid nightmare. But then I noticed something on the floor beside my bed, a small, perfect circle of frost, about the size of a dinner plate, exactly where the presence had crouched next to me. As I stared at it, the morning sun quickly melted it away, leaving just a damp spot on the carpet. Since that night, I've been sleeping with every light in the house on. I've also started researching the history of my house and the land it's built on. So far, I haven't found anything unusual. No tragic deaths, no Native American burial grounds, nothing that would explain what's happening. I've considered moving, but I sank all my savings into this place. Besides, some part of me wonders if it would even help. What if this thing isn't attached to the house, but to me? What if it follows me wherever I go? I still don't know if what I'm experiencing is supernatural or if I'm slowly losing my grip on reality. The rational part of my brain wants to believe it's all in my head. Stress, sleep paralysis, an overactive imagination. But then I remember the loose door handle, the circle of frost, the physical evidence that something was in my room that night. Whatever it is, it hasn't hurt me. Yet. Sometimes I get the bizarre feeling that it's guarding me rather than threatening me, like it's keeping watch. But its methods are terrifying, and I don't know what it wants or why it's here. All I know is that I'm not alone in my house, even when I'm the only one home, and whatever is sharing this space with me is getting bolder. Last night, I woke up to find all the photos in my hallway turned to face the wall. The night before, my shower turned on by itself at 3 in the morning. I'm writing this now because I need to tell someone, anyone, what's happening. I'm afraid of what might happen tonight. I'm afraid of what might happen if I fall asleep and forget to lock my door again. And I'm terrified of what I might see if next time I open my eyes fully when it puts its face next to mine. Story 22. I still get chills when I think about that night, even though it's been 7 years now. I've never shared this with my family because I know it would just reopen old wounds, especially for my sister and mom. But I need to get this off my chest, and maybe some of you have experienced something similar. When I was about 10, my mom came home one day with 2 kittens. She hadn't warned us, just walked through the door holding a cardboard carrier and announced, "We're keeping these 2. My dad rolled his eyes, but he knew arguing was pointless. Mom had a soft spot for animals that needed homes. The smaller one, Rascal, was this scraggly little orange tabby runt that the shelter was planning to put down because nobody wanted him. He was all bones and attitude, hissing at everyone when Mom first set him down. The other one was Julian, this gorgeous grey and white Siamese with the bluest eyes I've ever seen. He was elegant from day one, even as a kitten, like he knew he was special. It's funny how animals choose their people. Rascal decided I was his human almost immediately. After the initial hissing phase, he followed me everywhere. He'd sleep on my pillow, wait by the front door when I got home from school, and bring me gifts. Usually bottle caps or crumpled paper he'd find around the house. He was super social, always wanting to be in the middle of whatever was happening. Julian was different. He bonded intensely with my sister and my mom. He'd curl up on my sister's lap while she did homework, and he'd wait by the window for Mom to come home from work. He wasn't unfriendly to me or Dad, but it was obvious who his favorites were. Julian was also more dignified than Rascal. He didn't play with regular cat toys much, but he had this weird obsession with pencil-top erasers. You know, those little pink ones you can put on the end of pencils. He'd carry them around in his mouth and drop them at your feet, waiting for you to throw them so he could fetch them. It was the only time he'd really let loose and act silly. The cats grew up alongside us, becoming fixtures in our family life. When I hit high school, they were both healthy 7-year-old cats with seemingly many years ahead of them. There was never any sign that anything was wrong with either of them. Then it happened, completely out of nowhere. I was 16, in the middle of junior year. It was a Tuesday morning in October, around 5:30 a.m. I remember because I had an early band practice that day. I was still half asleep when I heard my sister scream from her bedroom. Not like a startled scream. This was guttural, primal, the kind of sound that makes your blood freeze. My parents' bedroom door slammed open. I heard my dad asking what was wrong, my mom crying out Julian's name. I stumbled out of bed and into the hallway. My sister was standing in her doorway, shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't even form words. My mom rushed past me into my sister's room. When she came back out, she was carrying Julian's body, cradled in her arms like a baby. His eyes were closed, his body completely limp. There was no blood, no sign of trauma. He looked like he was sleeping, except for the unnatural stillness. My mom was sobbing, repeating, "He was just sleeping with her. He was fine last night." The vet later told us it was probably a heart condition that had gone undetected. Apparently it's not uncommon in Siamese cats, but in that moment, all we knew was that Julian was gone, without any warning. What happened next is burned into my memory. My mom, still carrying Julian's body, went to each family member and said we needed to say goodbye. My dad reluctantly touched Julian's head, mumbling something I couldn't hear. My sister could barely look at him again, but she kissed his paw through her tears. When my mom came to me, I froze. I'd never seen a dead animal up close before, and even though it was Julian, a cat I'd lived with for years, I couldn't bring myself to touch him or say anything. I just turned away and went back to my room. I told myself I was late for band practice, that I'd deal with it later, but the truth is, I was scared and uncomfortable. I didn't know how to face death, even a pet's death. I still feel guilty about that moment, not giving Julian a proper goodbye when my mom asked me to. I went to school in a daze that day, and when I came home, Julian's body was already gone. My dad had buried him in the backyard under the maple tree while I was at school. That night was chaos. My sister was inconsolable. My mom wasn't much better, and Rascal was wandering around the house meowing, clearly aware that something was wrong. I had rehearsal for the school musical until 9 that night, so I wasn't home much. When I finally got back, everyone had retreated to their rooms. The house felt hollow, like the life had been sucked out of it. I was exhausted, emotionally and physically, so I just crashed in my bed around 10. Rascal wasn't in my room, which was unusual, but I figured he was probably with my mom or sister. They needed the comfort more than I did. I was drifting off to sleep when I felt it. Anyone who's ever slept with cats knows the sensation. The distinct feeling of a cat walking over your legs on the bed, the careful pressure of 4 paws, moving deliberately across the blanket. I assumed Rascal had finally come to join me, so I didn't even open my eyes at first. When the movement stopped, I reached down to pet him but felt nothing. I opened my eyes and looked toward the foot of my bed. Nothing was there. I sat up confused and scanned my dark room. That's when I noticed something on my desk chair, catching the faint light from my window. I squinted, trying to make out what it was, a small pink object. I got up and walked over to the chair. It was a pencil-top eraser, one of Julian's favorite toys. I froze, staring at it. I knew for a fact it hadn't been there when I went to bed. I keep my desk clean. I'm weirdly organized about my workspace, and I hadn't used an eraser like that in years. As I stood there trying to process what I was seeing, my bedroom door creaked open. Rascal padded in, yawning. He jumped up on my bed and curled into a ball on my pillow. That's when it hit me. The weight I'd felt on my legs couldn't have been Rascal. He'd just now entered the room. I looked back at the eraser, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe. A wave of understanding washed over me. Julian had come to say goodbye. The goodbye I'd denied him earlier that day. I grabbed the eraser and climbed back into bed, holding it tightly in my palm. Rascal snuggled against me as I broke down crying. I cried for hours, stroking Rascal with one hand and clutching Julian's eraser with the other. I apologized out loud to Julian for not saying goodbye properly, telling him I loved him and would miss him. I've never told my family about this. My mom and sister were devastated enough, and I didn't want to make things harder by bringing it up. I don't know if they'd believe me anyway, but I know what happened. Julian came back for one final farewell before moving on completely. The eraser is still in my desk drawer. I've moved twice since then, once for college and once for my current apartment, and I've always brought it with me. Sometimes I take it out and remember that night, that feeling of a cat walking across my bed when no cat was there. Rascal lived until last year, making it to 14 before kidney disease took him. I was with him at the end, and I made sure to say a proper goodbye. I sometimes wonder if Julian will be waiting for him, wherever cats go when they leave us. I'm not religious or particularly spiritual, but that night changed something in me. I don't know what exists beyond what we can see, but I know Julian visited me. I know he forgave me for turning away. And sometimes, on nights when I'm particularly sad or stressed, I swear I can feel the faintest pressure of paws walking across my bed.